I think we should now, like, turn back around and just discuss, like, the ride we've been in as fans following the series for as long as we have been.
So I guess, Sam, since you're our guest, you want to talk about how you got into One Piece first?
Yeah, it was just sort of the show that I've known of the show for like as long as I can remember. Like I think the first time I saw it was probably in like an old American Shonen Jump. It was during the Baratier arc, but I didn't really pay much attention to it because I was all about Dragon Ball and Naruto back then. Then once Funimation took over on Toonami, like when that news happened, and they're like, "Oh, that show that everyone keeps telling me is really good." And has had, a terrible dub this whole time. It's finally they're going to replace all those old actors with Dragon Ball Z actors, and it's going to be less edited, and it's going to be cooler. And I'm like, oh, that's super interesting. I want to see what that sounds like at the very least, because I knew the 4Kids version. Like I'd seen it on in the background plenty of times. I knew where the story was at that point, but it wasn't until I was actually watching it week to week. Just for the novelty of the new voices that I got hooked. I got to that point where Luffy punches Bellamy and he has that really cool where am I going? The sky moment. And I was like, okay, I just have to watch the whole show now. So I jumped to the fan subs, and I caught up in the Japanese version from there. And then when I caught up with the manga, I kind of had this revelation of oh my god. This is the new most important thing in my life. I caught up near the end of Marineford, which is when I finally was completely caught up, and Ace was just about to die. So, which was a pretty great time to catch up, because that ride is just every week it's just bam, 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 something just mind-blowingly crazy.
Yeah, that was definitely a pretty great read week to week.
Yes, I mean that was my experience is reading One Piece week to week for the first time was I started in Impel Down because I on the Toon Zone forums there would be this thread for people keeping up with the latest One Piece chapters. So one time I popped in there and I saw that, holy crap, Buggy, Mr. Sphere, Mr. 2 were back. What? When? Wow. And so I immediately oh man, so there's this Impel Down arc and all the old villains are going to come back and team up with Luffy. Oh my god, I have to read this. So that's when I started keeping up with the series week to week, starting from Impel Down onwards. And then Marineford, now that is quite a ride. But continue, Sam.
And I mean that was the bulk of me catching up with it and experiencing it for the first time. I have the most kind of softest spot for the Skypiea and Water 7 marathons, and for all the marathons that would come as a result of me catching up with the DVD releases. I just okay, starting with season 1, catching up with everything else that's been out lately, and just watching the dub for the first time and rewatching the old East Blue stuff.
Sid, you could talk about how you got into it. I'm actually kind of interested.
Okay, so I got into One Piece in 2005, and that 2005 was the year where I was really getting in to anime in general. Starting at the beginning of year, I caught the final couple episodes of Dragon Ball GT, and that got me into Dragon Ball, believe it or not. So I was marathoning a bunch of Dragon Ball from everywhere. I was getting tapes and stuff, and I was also watching the Lost episodes week to week because they took the first 16 episodes of GT and then they just saved them for later because no one liked the early stuff apparently. So they were broadcasting those, and I was watching those week to week, and I was super into them. And then I realized, oh no, it's over. It's gonna be done this week. Gosh darn it! What's happening? What is it? What show are they gonna replace my precious Dragon Ball with? And that show, guess what, was One Piece. And I was okay, well, I'll try this show.
I don't know about this One Piece thing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks
only
a
one
little
of them.
bit... It looks a little bit like Dragon Ball, I guess, but it's not Dragon Ball. I'll try this. And I watched the first couple episodes when they premiered, because when One Piece was added to Toonami for the first time, they aired it 2 episodes a week. So, I watched the first 2 episodes, and I was yeah, I could dig this. This is funny. I like this Luffy guy. He's he's a charming little protagonist. He's kind of like Goku. Yeah. So I that's how I got into One Piece. I started watching it on Toonami, and it would be like my third anime, basically, that I got into. Because I started off with Dragon Ball, and then in March of 2005 came Zatch Bell, and then May of 2005, that was One Piece. So One Piece was like one of my earliest anime series, and so, of course I've been with it for such a long time, but in my anime fandom. But yeah, so over the course of like however long, I would just watch One Piece on Toonami and whatever. And, I didn't know at the time, like, about all the changes from the original version or even about the, like, manga. I mean, like, I knew there was a manga because I'd seen it around, but, like, I hadn't read it yet until, like, the end of the year. Because at the end of 2005, that was when the first printing of Volume 9 of One Piece came out. Volume 9 being, like, the bulk of, like, some of the major bits in Arlong Park. That's Nami's backstory. Yeah. That's, like, the big scene at the end is, like, when Luffy goes to confront Arlong. That's, like... So I picked that up, and, like, because I'd seen that in the anime, and of course in the 4Kids version, a lot of that is completely different. Bellemere doesn't get shot. Like, she's thrown in prison in
sent to the dungeon.
Yeah, which I don't know. I guess she died in the dungeon. Otherwise, they would have. See, that confused me in the 4Kids dub because I didn't know. Like, did she die in the dungeon? Was she? Because why didn't they free her after like they beat Arlong? So I was. So now I read this volume. I picked it up. This was the first volume of One Piece I bought. I think this is it had to be like the first volume of a manga other than Dragon Ball that I picked up. So, this volume is also very special to me in that respect. And so, I read through it and I was like, whoa, the tone of this, it's still funny, but like it's a lot more serious than what the 4Kids version, what the anime was showing me. And whoa, the story between Nami and Bellemere, like I liked it in the anime, but wow, this is a lot more tragic than I had realized. Like, she actually died. Holy crap. And, the scene where, like, Nami was stabbing herself with the knife, stabbing her tattoo, screaming, Arlong, Arlong! Now, that was like, whoa. Now, when I sought out, like, the sub and saw this later again in the anime, like, a lot of this stuff is even more powerful. And I would say, like, Nami's backstory, and then, like, Nami stabbing herself in the tattoo, and then the march on Arlong Park. Like, that's something that's not in, like, the manga, like, them, like, marching to Arlong Park. And so, like, that scene in the anime is, like, one of my favorites, because, like, that is just such an epic build-up, but... Yeah. So like, Overtaken's my favorite track in the One Piece anime, I think, just because of that moment. But yeah, so, from then on, I was aware of the manga, and I would seek it out and read it more closely. Like, I found all the volumes that I could that Wiz had released at the time, and keep in mind, it wasn't very much for a long time, because, at the time I got this was like, at the time I got Volume 9, that was the newest volume. So I could only read up to then, basically, and try and, like, keep up with whenever the new volumes came out from there. But, I was more aware of, like, what was going on with One Piece, and that there were changes between the original version and what was airing on TV. So I would also, like, seek out the sub for a lot of the early stuff, and I would watch that. And I really enjoyed, the original version more, though I still, like, kept watching it on TV. But I would not say that I was, like, a huge One Piece fan until, like, when they started Alabasta on Toonami. Because that was, like, when the stakes, like, to me, felt like they really exploded, because now the Straw Hats were involved in this huge conspiracy plot with this princess who was really cool. And, like, so that is what, like, really got me deeply into One Piece. It made me, like, want to binge through more of the show and really, like, follow it closely, learn as much as I could about it. That's, like, when I was started, like, scouring over the Arlong Park forums and getting to more conversations with people online about it. And so, that's that, like, time period between, like, the Well, I guess it was actually around the same time. Actually, all this happened because I guess Alabasta, like the Brokework stuff started, I think in October 2005.
Somewhere
on
around
Toonami.
there.
Yeah, because they blew through it all like with 2 episodes a week throughout the summer. So yeah, so that was like my I guess honeymoon period. I don't know with One Piece. So yeah, and then I guess just from there, that's how I got into One Piece. That was my experience as a One Piece fan. And like when the Funimation dub came out, like I remember like the period of uncertainty when like we learned 4Kids had dropped the license and no one like knew like who was going to pick it up, if it was going to be picked up. And I remember all the relief everyone felt when they heard that Funimation was going to do it. And I was like, yeah, thank you, Funimation. And I was excited because, I love Dragon Ball and I love those actors. And so I was like really excited about watching that when that came out on Toonami, the Funimation dub. And for the longest time, I could not... I always imagined Piccolo saying Zoro's lines because, it is Chris Sabat. But, like, for some reason, I always, like, when I think of Chris Sabat, I always think of, like, him saying the Black Star Dragon Balls for some reason. Because in, like, episode 40 of Dragon Ball GT, he just pronounces it in a weird way. So that's just a funny little thing. But, yeah, so... I was really disappointed when they abruptly took it off Toonami in like the March of 2008 and stuff. But in the July of that year, that's when they put out the first DVD set of it. And I picked that up. I loved it. And I enjoyed keeping up with the dub. And around the same time, also, Funimation started simulcasting the series. Like in 2009, they started doing that. So from there on, I just like caught up to One Piece. And then over the next couple years, started reading it weekly, and that's basically like how I like solidified myself as a One Piece fan. And now I'll just turn it over to you, Colton, because I could go all day on One Piece memories, but we'll save that for later.
Yeah. So, man, yeah, I definitely have a history as well. So, if I remember correctly, I think I actually first got into One Piece around, I want to say around 2004, I think, because I remember catching it one morning on Fox when it was still airing there. So I caught it before it started airing on Toonami, I think. And I think around that time, I remember what episode it was. It was actually in the middle of Drum Island, and it was right after the avalanche happened. So I started watching it from there. And basically from there, I'm kind of jumping ahead. I know we'll probably discuss this later, but I think that's part of the reason why Drum Island is probably my favorite arc in the entirety of the series, is because that's where I started watching One Piece. And I think that was the point where I was like, where as I kept watching, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting and really cartoony and kind of like emotionally resonant with me. And I kept watching it from there. And eventually I would catch reruns on Cartoon Network. I remember specifically Miguzi at the time was doing like reruns of it in syndication, I think, at the time, like 5 episodes a week or something.
Yeah, they basically rebroadcast everything that was on Toonami, but just they didn't call it Toonami.
Yeah, Miguzi was a fun time. Very fond memories of that block, but yeah, that's basically how I watched most of the 4Kids dub. So the 4Kids dub definitely has a soft spot in my heart. I love to quote it whenever I can. It's great.
Yeah, I can sing the entire rap from memory. It's amazing.
I actually own a bit of the Arlong Park 4Kids dub on DVD somewhere. I just have to find it. My parents. It was one of those things my parents bought me for my birthday, where it's like, oh, my kid likes anime, I guess. He likes this thing called One Piece. Is this it, son? And I'm like, close enough.
Yeah. Eventually, Funimation has to make like a Walk the One Piece set, like how they did for the original Saban dub of Dragon Ball Z. They gotta do
One
a
Piece,
4Kids
One
Piece
edition.
re-release. Yes. The Yo Ho Ho Take a Bite of Gum Gum edition.
I I'm not gonna lie, I'd buy it. I would probably actually spend I don't know how much I would probably spend $100 on that shamelessly. Actually, I would buy that, but and I kind of want them to do that. But yeah, so I guess from there, I'm trying to remember because for like the next year or two, I would watch it obviously exclusively through the 4Kids dub, and then that's when I started making trips to my local Borders when that was still in business. I actually had one about, I want to say like a 20-minute walk away from where I lived at the time. So I would always walk up the Borders and just take a look at whatever manga they had because I was just starting to get into like comics in general at the time. Buying like Garfield collections and stuff because I was really into newspaper comics at the time. And that's when I first started noticing, One Piece is a book. I didn't know that, and I would start flipping through it. I flipped through some of the volumes until eventually I was like, you know what, I want to buy the first volume, and then I did, and eventually I think I gave it away to a friend of mine who wanted to get into it. So unfortunately, I don't have that first volume on me anymore. I eventually got a new printing of it, but I kind of wish I kept it because man, I read through that first volume quite a lot. It was pretty used. Like the paper was all yellow. The binding, while it was still like, pages weren't falling out or anything. Like it was, you could tell the spine was worn because I would read that first volume a lot back in the day. Of that, along with because I think at the time I caught up to the Viz releases. The Viz release was in the middle of Little Garden, so I forget which volume it was. I want to say volume 14, 13, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
I'm going to say 14. Volume 14. Which was basically like the middle of Little Garden, I would just read constantly because of Viz's release schedule at the time. I think it was like a volume every 3 months or something like that. I would just constantly read through that volume until the next one came out. So, luckily I would, manga was a little, at least Viz manga was a little cheaper back then. Like it was like $7.95 a volume or something. So I was able to, even as like a middle schooler at the time, I was like in 6th, 7th grade, I would still be able to afford, the latest One Piece releases at the time, and I would buy them whenever they came out. I'm trying to think where it went from there. That was also around the time I just started getting into Shonen Jump in general, so I would also buy, the newest issues of Viz's monthly print Shonen Jump, which I think around the time I started buying those, the Viz run, I think, was when I started buying them, they were like, I want to say at the point in Arlong Park where Luffy was fighting Arlong. And so I would also, I guess before I bought the volumes, I would keep up with the manga that way. But eventually, like after a couple of months, I just started buying volumes, and I eventually bought all of whatever was out. God, so imagine my surprise when eventually, like, Viz started putting out, like, what was it, 5 volumes a month for, like, 6 months up until they caught up to, like, I think the manga was around Impel Down or Marineford at the time.
Yeah.
So, and I remember specifically, because I used to frequent Arlong Park forums a lot more back then, and I went on this whole big rant about how I thought, Viz is never going to catch up with One Piece. It's never going to happen. And then literally, like, I think that same day or that same week, some relatively short time after that, Viz announced their catch-up. And so I had egg on my face. I wish I could find that original post.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, Viz definitely proved me wrong. I think at that point, I was like, I think that was when I was at my, I don't know if I want to say my peak in fandom, because, obviously I would still consider myself a fan of One Piece, but I think around that point in my life, I was probably the most passionate about it. And then I think from there, like, I would obviously watch the anime, because, around when Funimation picked it up, that's when I started learning too, like, about all the really, really horribly funny 4Kids edits and whatnot, and I always thought those were interesting. Obviously at the time, I caught up with the anime through fan subs, and I think at the time, I'm trying to remember where the anime was at. I'm pretty sure the anime had just gotten out of Enies Lobby and was just starting Thriller Bark. So with the series at that point at the time, I think it took me like 6 months to catch up to the anime to that point. And so I had the pleasure of watching Thriller Bark week to week, which I know a lot of people, would probably say, oh, well, Thriller Bark's too slow week to week in the anime, which I don't know if like I just wasn't aware of like the anime's pacing at the time or something, but like I had no problem watching Thriller Bark week to week just because, like, I don't know, I just wasn't aware of that kind of thing back then.
That was the point where I did jump to the manga for the first time. Like, I finished, Enies Lobby, which just blew my... do we swear on here?
Yeah, we can do that.
You can if you want, it's fine.
Enies Lobby, which, blew my fucking balls off. And then we're transitioning into Thriller Bark, and I remember having this like distinct thought like, oh my god, has One Piece peaked? Like, is the best of it behind me? And then I just caught up with the manga of Thriller Bark, and it blew my fucking balls off. So
no, I remember there was specifically a point where my best friend at the time, because he and I were both into One Piece, we both watched the 4Kids stuff on TV, and I would talk to him about Alabasta at the time and be like, oh, hey, dude, did you see the newest episode or whatever? Like, oh, I can't believe a Luffy lost a crocodile. And my friend just kind of looks at me and goes like, it kind of looks at me like, oh, you don't even know where I'm at. Because at that point, I'm pretty sure the anime, as far as Japan was concerned, was like right in the middle of Enies Lobby. Because he would tell me like, oh, yeah, because he asked me like, oh, hey, did you see the newest episode? And I'm like, yeah, I saw the newest episode on TV. I'm like, no, online, Luffy's fighting this giant cheetah guy named Lucci. And I'm like, what?
That sounds fake.
I was so confused, like, what are you talking about? And then that's how I basically started getting into watching fan subs at that point. And, like, that was a point in my anime fandom where it's like, oh, you can actually watch ahead of where Toonami is? That's amazing. Like, that was an amazing concept to me at the time. Like, how do you even do that?
That was Naruto for me.
For me, that was Pokemon. And so that was even earlier, like in elementary school. Like, I talked with randomly, like one day, my friends were talking to me, hey, did you see the newest Pokemon? And I was like, yeah, it was cool. But Mace Torchic is cool. And they were like, no, Mace Torchic has become a Combuskin in the latest episode. And I'm like, what? That didn't happen. And they're like, it happened. Look online. And I was like, oh man. So that's how I got into watching fan subs as early as elementary school, is because I learned that the Pokemon, the TV was like a year behind of where it was in Japan.
Yeah, Naruto was also one of those things at the time where I was like, oh, I can watch this ahead of Toonami. Because I remember specifically watching the episode where I think Naruto was just coming back from getting Tsunade to be the Hokage or whatever, and it was specifically the hot springs episode, essentially. I remember watching that ahead of Toonami's run. I was like, oh, this is neat. I'm gonna do this forever now. But yeah, just going back to One Piece, I caught up with the anime in about 6 months up to the beginning of Thriller Bark, and that's when I started watching weekly. As far as the manga goes, I pretty much watched all of Thriller Bark as it aired, and then sometime after that, I started reading the manga, because around the time of the manga, my friend had kept telling me like, oh, Luffy and the crew ran into this like masked guy named Duval. Like, I wonder who he is. And I remember kind of being a part of that conversation and speculation, like, oh, who's it gonna be? Is it gonna be like I thought at one point, or it could be like Don Krieg or Kuro or whatever. Wouldn't it be cool if it was somebody from East Blue? And obviously that reveal came, and I was like, oh, I totally didn't expect that. So I think that was basically the point that convinced me, okay, I got to start reading this. And then it's weird. I read a couple of chapters, and then I just kind of fell off of it because I was probably just distracted by other things at the time. And then I actually, like, for real, started reading the manga around the time the Straw Hats separated at Shabani Archipelago, which was one hell of a time for me to start reading weekly. Because it's like, oh man, what's going on? Like, I guess all the Straw Hats are done. Like, I guess the series is going to end soon or something. I don't know.
I remember having that distinct worry that Luffy was going to have to give up on the other guys and start a whole new crew.
The series went for 2 whole years with the crew separated. So it was like, I remember everyone was like losing their patience or like getting where like when are the rest of the Straw Hats going to come back? Are they going to be in the war? What's happening? So it's like it was really uncertain times for like the future of the Straw Hat pirate crew, and then like, but that just fueled like the intensity that was going on in Marineford because like having been separated from this crew, like Luffy could only like really like go and rescue the person that was right there in front of him, which was his brother and stuff. So like you really felt like the emotional tension in that arc there, and which I think that's why it's just part of why it's so heartbreaking what happens.
But yeah, pretty much from there, I read the manga weekly, and I have a lot of great memories of just me being in high school and pretty much just dicking around in like my free study period or whatever. I would be watching the anime whenever it was out. I'd read the newest chapters as they were online or whatnot, and reading all of Marineford week to week while I was still in high school, and those were some really fun times. I would always have friends like look over my shoulder like, "Hey, what are you watching?" And I'd be like, "Oh, it's that One Piece thing." And I did make a few friends in high school because of that, because they happened to be in the One Piece too, and you know those were some pretty fun times. So yeah. I'm trying to think. I had another memory I wanted to share, but now I can't think of it. I'm sure it'll come back to me. That's pretty much my history with One Piece, though. Just a lot of great memories. Just as a teenager, just keeping up with certain parts of the series week to week.
So we all started like around the same couple years from each other, and we all also started keeping up with the manga weekly around the same like basic period during like when the whole like Whitebeard War saga was in full swing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like we've all been with One Piece for over 10 years now, like basically.
It's just to put it in perspective, I've been a fan of One Piece for as long as I've been a fan of manga in general. So
yeah, same for me. But yeah, for me, it's also like over half my life, basically, because I got into it when I was 9 and I'm 21 now, so.
I think I was, how old was I? I want to say I was around like probably 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. It was 2007 when Funimation took over, which is when I got really into it, so that was it's going to be a decade in like, I think, November? September? Can't remember which one.
It started in October, the Funimation dub.
Yeah, I think it did.
So I missed on both sides.
I remember watching that first episode of the Funimation dub and just being like totally encaptured by like the opening at the time, Hikarie opening 3.
Yeah, that was a good cover by Vic Mignogna.
That became my favorite One Piece opening for a long time. Because, yeah, whenever I listen to that opening, I'm just hit with this wave of nostalgia of that first time I was at home and I caught that first Funimation episode.
Yeah. I mean, that was a really special time because, like, One Piece was the biggest draw for Toonami, basically, at the time. For me, because, I mean, I guess the Sasuke retrieval arc was going on in Naruto, so that was also okay, but, like, One Piece, like, what was happening in One Piece, even though at the time it wasn't, like, as grand is, like, what was happening with the Sasuke retrieval arc, like, it was just more interesting to me in terms of the adventure it was setting up, and it felt so fresh and exciting because it was the Funimation dub, and it was going to legitimize One Piece again, and make it more popular, and everyone was excited, and it didn't really pan out, because Cartoon Network decided they hated anime, but...
I remember what I wanted to say. So I also remember very vividly, like, around 2009, when Funimation started simulcasting the anime and how big of a deal that was.
Yeah. I also remember the controversy when episode 403 leaked early, and that caused a lot of problems. But yeah, that was... So yeah, those were also uncertain times, but luckily that got rectified, and are where we are now.
Well, I was going to say that was a very interesting time for me, because that was around the time when I started really learning about like why fans really shouldn't like fully support like fan subs, and I was learning about piracy at that point, because I remember CNN did this whole story about animation in Japan and actually did some kind of like spotlight report about just Japanese animation in general, and like what animators what their working conditions were like in Japan. And I remember them focusing on stuff like Dragon Ball and One Piece and spotlighting those series. when they were doing that story. And I remember just seeing, the kind of working conditions some of these animators had to go through. I was just thinking like, wow, that's terrible. And I think that's what scared me into basically trying to support the things I love legally. So from then on, I would basically try and watch the simulcast whenever I could, which at the time, Funimation's player I had a whole bunch of problems with them back in the day. Like, it's only like just recently that I feel like that their video player, I feel like, has really gotten to the point where like I don't really have any problems with it anymore. Like because I remember when the simulcast was first starting, like there were a lot of bugs. Like I would have to I'd have to like wait for the video to load, and it would like stop in the middle, and I had to like start all over, and it's like just so much heartache just to watch like one episode back in the day. Which thankfully it's not as bad, nowadays.
It's really easy now.
Yeah, and obviously around that time is also when I started getting into the One Piece podcast too, Sam. But yeah, like. And I think I mentioned earlier in the show, like the One Piece podcast was the first podcast I ever listened to, so I ever started listening to. So basically throughout my entire like high school career, if you want to call it that, I just have so many memories of like keeping up with One Piece weekly through both the anime and the manga, and listening to the One Piece podcast guys every week. That was basically the highlight of my week back in the day, and I still look forward to listening to them every Monday.
How about now we kind of talk about, like, how we used to express our fandom and now how we do it now. And then what I mean by that is kind of, like, when we were into One Piece, like, how did we kind of show it? Like, did we make anything, fan art or cosplay, or, like, what like, drove, like, we all got super into it, so how did, like, we communicate it? And for me, it was, like, I really wanted to get people into One Piece, like, because I felt like it just was not as recognized and wasn't getting the kind of attention it deserved. So whenever I could, I would try and recommend and show One Piece to people. And, it didn't always get people interested in them. But like one moment that I was actually really successful in doing was, believe it or not, during my 6th grade Intro to Business course, where we had to give a power presentation on any topic of our choosing. And I chose to do mine on One Piece. And of course, I gathered up clips and pictures. I remember on the character sheet, alongside all the Straw Hats, I included Buggy, just because I loved Buggy so much, I wanted to talk about him. So I made this super nerdy presentation, but like I guess I described it so passionately enough that I actually did get people who came up to me later and they were like, "Hey, I watched that One Piece show. It was pretty cool. I got that latest DVD set that had Chopper in it that you recommended." And I was like, "Wow, I did it. Awesome." So that was pretty cool for me, that I was actually able to, get people into One Piece.
I actually did have a kind of similar experience where I've given presentations on it in class, and someone would come up like after class and be like, "Dude, that was amazing what you said."
I honestly, yeah. I did the same thing too. Like I remember in English class, I think in my freshman year, I did a presentation on One Piece. I specifically focused on Luffy versus Usopp. And kind of what was going on around, because at the time that was like probably it's still some of my favorite portions of the series, but at the time I was so in love with that portion of Water 7 that like I did a presentation about that particular fight and part of the story in class. And back when I ran Anime Club at high school too, those were the episodes of the anime that I showed everybody, and it caught everybody's interest. I don't know if they really went on to watch One Piece after that, but, they were still pretty interested in what they saw. I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. It's actually, more serious than I thought. And even like a couple years later into like my, I want to say my senior year, I even did like an entire like essay on One Piece and its popularity and like, about the series and what it means to me and whatnot. I think it was like a 10-page essay. Outside of that, I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but yeah, I got some pretty high marks for that, actually. I think I got like a B+ on that essay. Did pretty good. But yeah, so I incorporated it in a lot of some of my school projects whenever I could. And at the time, actually, was when I I was also really big into YouTube too, so there was just a summer where I would do nothing but make videos using Windows Movie Maker on my old desktop computer. So I would make One Piece AMVs. I don't think any of them are online now. I still have a collection of them on my hard drive. And I would take like audio from other things and like place it in One Piece clips and stuff, that kind of thing. And those were really fun times for me. And thank God none of these are online anymore, but there was a time in my life where I did try to dabble in fan dubs, so that was pretty fun.
I was hoping that's what you were going to say.
So I don't know if I have any of those anymore, and like I said, I know those aren't up online or anything, but yeah, those were fun times when I thought I was funny, because I would just reference other anime and stuff, because that was the funny thing to do. But outside of that, I think like I said, I was on Arlong Park forums a lot at the time. I'm not on there as much anymore, but I remember being on there discussing a lot of different things and whatnot. And there was also one year during Halloween where I actually tried to where I dressed up as Sanji. So that was fun. I even I tried to stay in character and do like the shitty 4Kids accent. And nobody knew what I was going for, so everybody actually thought I was like dressed up as some kind of weird, a weird amalgamation of like Rocky and so I don't know. It was weird. No, I felt so embarrassed because nobody knew what I was going for. So
Blonde Rocky.
Yeah, Blonde Rocky.
Did you have a cigarette or a lollipop?
I had a lollipop. Oh, and the worst part about that night is I remember it was Halloween, so I was trick-or-treating with my family, and I remember passing by like this group of kids from school who knew me, so they somehow recognized me through my costume, so that was really fun. And they were all like, "Oh, is that Colton? What was he dressed as?" And I'm just like trying to look away from them. I hope they don't notice me. So that kind of backfired on me, but it was still pretty fun though.
I never made an AMV, I guess, to be technical, but like back when Toonami first came back in 2012, 2013, like I got into making like Toonami style promos and music videos. So I made one for One Piece, and this was like way back before they announced that One Piece was returning to Toonami. And like I used clips from Baroque Works and Alabasta and Skypiea. And it was like a minute and a half long. It's still up on YouTube. You can like search for it. It's under my Lam Ram Yasha channel name. But so yeah, I made that. And then of course I always drew some art back when I was younger. Not as much as I did for Dragon Ball, but I would like draw fan art and stuff. And I guess like the only other like big creative thing that I guess I would mention was that back in 2014, me and some friends over at Animation Revelation did a top 30 greatest story arcs in anime and manga list, and we put Enies Lobby from One Piece on there. We did actually combine Water 7 and Enies Lobby, and then I wrote the write up for the Water 7 half because I was more passionate about that half, and my other friend Dr. Insatsu Ken he wrote the half for Enies Lobby. So those are like the other big things I wanted to mention. And I guess a tangentially related memory is I don't have that much One Piece merchandise outside of the DVDs, excluding two like pins. I guess, what do you call them? Like you tie. They're like little things you can tie onto your bags or whatever. I forget what you technically call them. Brain fart. But like I won those in a contest on TanamiFaithful.com for like making a Toonami music video, and so I got like second place. So they sent over Mr. Tubon clay and crocodile like pins to me, and I was like, yeah, because I love those characters a lot. So those are just like some One Piece related projects memories.
Speaking of figures, yeah, I've definitely collected my share of like not necessarily POPs, but like I do have a lot of like random box kind of figures like that I've collected over the years. Like as I've gone to like local conventions, like I I have a tiny Blackbeard, a tiny Garp, tiny Kizaru, and I even have some of those little bobble ships. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Where it's like ships from different crews in the series. Like I have the Thousand Sunny, and I think I have the Big Top too, which is a buggy ship. Which I was disappointed because when I bought those, I couldn't tell like what the box was trying to represent because I somehow thought that like the little motion lines on the box art that was trying to represent like, oh, like the ship like bobbles on this little stand thing. I thought it like played music for some reason, so that's why I bought it. But then I opened it. At first I was like, oh, it just bobbles. That's lame. But I was like, oh, but I still own the Thousand Sunny in some capacity, so I was happy.
Sam, did you do any other creative projects for One Piece?
Oh yeah, I've made my fair share of AMVs. They can still be found on my Lucky Chainsaw YouTube. They're really good, for the record.
Awesome.
I definitely wrote essays for One Piece podcast. Nowadays I probably don't shove One Piece down other people's throats as much as I used to. I just sort of let my own enthusiasm come naturally and just hope it's infectious.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and obviously some fan art from forever ago. As far back as the beginning, there was fan art. So
yeah, I always love drawing villains. Like I really like Buggy. I really like Mr. Two, Bon Clay, and Crocodile. So I would always draw the villains. Like that was kind of like with Dragon Ball too. I would always draw Majin Buu and Cell. So I don't know. I guess I was always fascinated with Oda's like villains and villains caricature designs. But, on the subject of also AMVs, like, what are some of your guys' favorite AMVs besides the ones you've made? Because for me, there's this one called This Is One Piece, which is, like, by far one of my favorite AMVs of all time. And I forget the song it's set to, but I remember seeing that, and, like, it really gave me, like, a huge emotional swell, because, I mean, it heavily used quips from, like, all over. And I don't know like what the original channel name for it was, but looking up right now, it best AMVs of all time 2 is where I'm seeing it, and like the thumbnail is like when Luffy stands up after like being after Lucci thinks he's taken him down, and he's about to use like go on his final like assault on Lucci. And, the way it begins with, like, the guitar strings and stuff and, like, the words that flash by on the screen, like, adventure, enemies, Nakama, pirates, and, it's just so good. Okay, so the song was Prayer of the Refugee by Rise. Yeah. So, that's my favorite, like, One Piece AMV. I watch that, like, every now and again, and it's, like, it still fills me up with, like, a bunch of emotion. Like this AMV like kind of like makes me think back about like my early days of getting into One Piece, and it's like really makes me remember like the emotions I used to feel like when I was first getting into it, and like how excited I was for everything new that I was discovering about the series.
I do remember watching a lot of One Piece AMVs back in the day, but the one that's always stuck out to me for some reason, not particularly because like I'm sure if I looked back on it, it probably isn't like edited particularly well, but I don't know. The one that really stuck out to me, and I don't even know if it's on YouTube anymore. The last time I tried finding it, I couldn't find it, but I remember finding an AMV about Mr. 3 in Little Garden. Played to the song by Panic at the Disco. The only difference between Martyrdom and Suicide is press coverage. Which I don't know why that one sticks out in my mind. It's probably because I just like that song, even though I don't really listen to a lot of other Panic at the Disco songs. That was just this that was definitely a song I downloaded and put it on my MP3 player at the time because it's like, oh, it's from this One Piece AMV. It makes me think of One Piece, even though it really doesn't have much to do with One Piece at all. So I don't know. I just remember specifically that AMV because I remember watching it a lot when I was like in middle school. I had very interesting taste in music back in the day.
I was also a big fan of D-Nubs Pro's One Piece's 6 Minutes. D-Nubs is a friend of mine now, but like I used to, before I knew him, I loved his video. And there was one user, I don't think he ever had like a YouTube channel. I think people just like re-uploaded his from wherever he was putting them up. But like someone who went by Gia Secondo did just like these like, they basically just the big fights of the series set to like heavy metal songs. I was very into the Everybody versus Oars set to The Cage by Sonata Arctica. Was a cool one that I remember as a kid.
Yeah, there are a lot of great One Piece AMVs out there that are like worth seeking out. I probably will link the ones we've talked about in the episode description.
I was going to say, good luck finding any of the ones I mentioned, because probably none of them are up anymore.
I'll see if I can dig around on the interwebs. Maybe someone's archived them somewhere. But yeah, there are a lot of like cool things that people have done in the fandom, like cool pieces of art, cool AMVs. That's what I really love about the One Piece fandom, is that it is so passionate and creative.
I mean, One Piece just kind of has this sense of creativity that I don't think can be really captured by too many other things.
And I think, like, the man himself, the man behind it all, Eiichiro Oda, is, like, one of the most creative and, like, awesome mangaka out there. He works himself to death, but, like, his worlds, his imagination, it's boundless. It's, like, insanity. I love him. So I wanted to kind of talk about, like, when we first kind of learned about Eiichiro Oda and, like, you know, started to look more into the man behind One Piece and what our opinion of Oda himself is as a mangaka. I
wanna hear from Sam on this first, actually.
I think he's a genius, and I wish I had his skills. Particularly, well, no, because like it's less the drawing that really attracts me to him, and more the writing. Honestly, just the way that. Like the amount of like just emotional spark that the kind of rhythm and flow of his stories has. You'd think it would be super easy to kind of lose that in the process of doing it week to week and having to build to those moments. But some of the stuff that gets pulled off is like honestly jaw dropping. Like people should be like learning from him. I think is how I feel.
Like I've dabbled in like, you know, writing here and there before, and never really like fully pursued it, and always thought about the idea of creating my own world. And then, you know, one time years and years ago, I've tried to do that kind of thing, and even back then, I couldn't fathom like, you know, like I was in such awe of like Oda and his skill, because it's like it's hard to create a world that feels as fleshed out as his does. Like, I mean, like. It's kind of hard for me to even put into words just how amazingly difficult that has to be. Like not just anyone can do that, to do what he does.
Yeah, Oda is definitely a huge inspiration to me as an artist and writer, and you know, the way that he can like weave such a grand scale narrative and, you know, bring back plot elements from like the very early days and bring them up again in like in a modern context with like in a whole new light, and just make it everything in the story feel so cohesive and so planned up, and so well planned out, and just
especially
seamless.
Knowing that some of it is not actually well planned out, some of it he is making up as he goes.
I mean, Toriyama, he made things up as he went, and you know, he did a pretty good job considering. You know, making things seem like, this makes sense. He really salvaged things here, but like Oda is just like so much. His writing is so much deeper and just so much more like well tuned. It's just like he has a great knack for keeping in mind like what's going on in his world and all his characters, and like what things he wants to explore further. And then, you know, even if he changes direction later on and decides to expand on things, he knows how to do it in a way that doesn't feel like it's out of place or like he's just abruptly changed something. He knows how to make it come across as really natural, and it's just such really skillful storytelling.
I was gonna say, like, among just Jump authors in particular, I would consider Akira Toriyama and Hideaki Sorachi, the author of Gintama. I would consider both of them to be master bullshitters. Honestly, almost especially in Toriyama's case, with how he's able to, you know, write himself out of corners a lot of times within the span of Dragon Ball and whatnot. But
Well, I think the way Dragon Ball works is that there aren't any corners for him to really write himself into. Like the stories are usually it's usually just one thing at a time. So like when he moves on to something else, you're not feeling like there's a million plot threads being left open.
Yeah.
I mean, Toriyama just forgets about anything that he's previously said or done in his stories, so he just keeps focusing on what's happening right now. And he never like really sets up anything for like a grander like payoff. It's all
sometimes
about
it feels like it. Like I feel like
it feels like it. Yeah, like the Super Saiyan thing, Goku being an alien, things like that.
I think all of like Vegeta's like 3 or 4 character arcs are all like actually like properly well thought out.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah, Vegeta's character arc is my favorite in Dragon Ball because I think it does flow the most seamlessly and has the most satisfying payoff as you see his journeys through the beginning to the end of Z.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Oda like is just really skilled at his character arcs, and like there's a big criticism of like Oda's writing that his characters don't change, which I completely disagree with. Because like there's this great piece on the One Piece podcast site about Luffy's character growth, it's a little more subtle. Like there aren't like these big dramatic changes, but like the characters do learn from their experiences, and they do have their arcs that they're going through. And like the most pronounced character arc in One Piece of the main cast, I think, is Usopp, and I think that's partially why he's my favorite, aside from other things I really love about Usopp. But he has, I think, the most satisfying character arc because he does have the most dramatic growth from like how he was at the beginning of series and how he is now. But like all the other characters are the same way. Well, I feel
to make a kind of a counterpoint, like kind of what Oda gets away with there is he will give a character like a big dramatic kind of arc and have them change, but then like later you won't feel those changes as dramatically as you would think. Like that was part of the reason why people were so frustrated with Usopp in Dressrosa right before he got his observation haki. That's why people were frustrated with how the Sanji stuff is being handled right now. Like it feels like they should be changing a lot more than they maybe actually have. But I think with a long serialized story like this, I think expecting the characters to like change at the end of every arc or so is not really the story that's getting told. I think one of the problems with like the Marvel formula right now is everyone expects like with every adventure the character has to become a completely different person at the end of a movie. But like when you've got like a million different movies, that stops feeling all that genuine. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think the concept of a character arc is so directly tied to like how we are used to seeing them in movies in like a pre-cinematic universe age, which I don't think works exactly the same in television or in like longer form movie franchises.
Yeah, I think there's this misconception that for a character arc, there has to be like a dramatic change, like the character needs to become a completely different person.
Right.
But
that's what screenwriting books tell you has to happen.
Yeah, but that's not really that's not the only way to do a character, and that's not even the best way necessarily.
Right.
Like I think like the stuff with Sanji right now, like it's not like he's become a completely different person. But I feel like everything that he's been through in the current arc has really like developed his character in interesting ways and given us an even better, stronger understanding of him. And it's like the current arc is one of my favorite arcs in a while because of how character focused it's been, and that's why I've been enjoying it so much.
Yeah, I was gonna say on that front, if anything, I feel like I understand Sanji's character a lot better than I used to. But yeah, I remember years and years ago when a friend of mine, who I'm not friends with anymore because he was an asshole, but he was always very very opinionated, and it was his opinion or no one else's. And I remember having constant arguments with him about he would say the same thing, like, oh well, One Piece is actually not that good because Luffy doesn't change as a character; he's just the same. And I'm like, well. I would use the same arguments. Like, I think I remember I even sent in a question to the One Piece podcast guys about this kind of thing. Like, yeah, I have this friend who just constantly gives me this it gives me this like weird argument, and I'm like, how do I convince him? Like, hey, like, yeah, I agree with you guys that Luffy's whatever change Luffy goes through is subtle. Like, he's still gonna be the same character we all know and love, and I don't think there's a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also of the opinion, and I've talked about this a lot on Twitter before, is that I feel like this might be a whole other can of worms, but part of my problem with One Piece post time skip is I feel like a lot of the characters, I don't expect them to like go through any kind of drastic change per se, so much as I feel like most of the Straw Hats have been sort of stale in their development.
I feel one of my criticisms post time skip is that I feel like Oda was not used to writing the characters after 2 years, so like for like the first couple arcs post time skip, like he just like kind of exaggerated their quirks to like kind of just flanderize levels. I feel like Sanji was the worst victim of this, with him like suffering blood loss from nosebleeds in Fishman Island, and like so
I mean he was even kind of I would say his the like the downward spiral of his character, I would argue even kind of began as far as back as like Enies Lobby, where the whole thing with him just sticking to his code of not hitting women, I thought that was a little infuriating.
I don't really have a problem with that. It's like, for me, it's like the biggest problem is seen during the comedic moments when like Oda is relying on like jokes like Usopp's cowardice or Nami's like obsession with money and stuff. Like during a lot of those moments when they're done post time skip, it feels like Oda's remembering, oh hey, this is a thing the characters used to do. I'll just do. I guess I should do them, but it doesn't feel appropriate a lot of the time, or it feels a little too exaggerated. It feels like the characters maybe should have grown out of it, or at least not go to this extreme in how they're, acting upon these like quirks. Sanji again was like the worst victim of this because it ended up becoming a plot point, which was ridiculous. But
and all of his stuff on like Kabaka Island and all that.
Yeah, that's a can of worms there.
That stuff is not held up very well.
No.
like I remember like at the time I remember I was in high school. You don't
have a reason to think about it as much.
Yeah,
then and then
exactly.
You look back at it now, and it's just like it feels like genuinely like nasty and mean spirited.
Yeah.
Man,
I mean, there's some great queer characters in One Piece, or like coded queer, like even Kava Monclay, but like the Kamabaka Island stuff. The joke is Sanji is running from like these ugly men that are like act feminine and stuff, and that definitely feels like a step backwards in terms of good representation.
Yeah.
But overall, like, we love Oda as a storyteller. The scale of his story is great, and to me he's always been like one of the standard for like storytelling in shonen manga. Like he is like at the top tier, and then like
for me,
Togashi
he's the standard
is also,
of just fantasy epic storytelling across the board. Like to me, like in my mind, like stuff like Star Wars or like Lord of the Rings, like that stuff exists so that one day somebody could figure out how to make One Piece.
Yes. I mean, and Oda is influenced by those kind of things, so
right.
you definitely feel the lineage of like what he's been inspired by, and like how he's taken that and developed it into like his own take, his own storytelling style, which is really so unique. And like One Piece, it takes influence from those type of influences and other manga influences, but there isn't anything that quite feels like One Piece, I feel, in terms of how it develops as a story and like the tone and the kind of adventure it is.
Mm-hmm.
And
just how like I just keep going back to like Skypiea, which is still just like my 10 out of 10 this is what a fantasy adventure is sort of arc.
Yeah, like Skypiea is a great example because, a lot of people criticize Skypiea because at the time, they didn't really see what the point of it was in the grand scheme or whatever, but like, it's such a cool adventure.
Well, it feels like filler. Like even when I was watching it for the first time, like Skypiea was like my first proper arc, and I remember even having to look up to make sure it wasn't filler, because it was like because we're just before then we were introduced to like all this interesting like world government warlord stuff.
Yeah,
the Whitebeard, like all this massively interesting big picture is going on. Luffy's got a new bounty. We just got a new crew member, and then it's like, oh man, what's next? What's the next big thing that they're gonna do to shock the world? And then they go up to the sky where the world does not see them.
Yeah.
But then that's also one thing that Oda's incredible at is he will take you down detours. Like he'll tease you about something you're really excited to hear. You think you're going in that direction. We go on a detour and you have that moment of like, I was really excited to see that other thing. But then that detour takes you down somewhere incredible that you didn't even think you were going to have as much fun as you do.
Exactly. There's no wasted plot point or like arc in One Piece. Like everything has a purpose in the grand scheme of things. And Skypiea is like one of the most important like lower arcs, because we get so much like setup and like hints at like what the nature of the old world was, and like Eneru's cover story that like happens after that down the line. At the same time,
part of me also kind of wants Skypiea to remain like as much of a standalone as it can. I hesitate at the thought of Eneru coming back just because I like Skypiea kind of as its own thing. I like that there exist arcs in One Piece that are kind of their own thing for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of would like Eneru to come back just because I like the character.
Yeah.
But more than that, I want the Straw Hats to go to the moon.
That's good. I feel like that has to happen at some point. Like it kind of happened in Toriko too, and I hope One Piece kind of does the same, where it's like eventually we're gonna go and do space stuff.
Speaking of Toriko, I want to briefly talk about Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro's Memories of Oda one-shot that he recently did in the last issue of Jump, which was such a heartwarming, like really great look into like, his relationship with Oda, and also like kind of how Oda was when he was starting out as a mangaka, and like how he really hasn't changed all that much as he's been over the past 20 years. And, it's like a great insight into like, how Oda started up his career, and then like, how far he's come. And it's just really cool to see it through the eyes of like basically his best friend, Shimabukuro.
It was amazing, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about it, Sam?
I thought it was cool.
I mean, there's not really much I feel like we can add to that. It's just, it was great to see some more insight into the actual relationship between Shimabukuro and Oda, because I had been aware for a while that the two of them were pretty tight in some capacity. They had a somewhat strong friendship or whatnot, but it was really nice to get a real like personal look at just how they interact with each other. From the beginning all the way up to, their various successes in the manga industry. And it's so nice to see that they're just able to like talk about the things they love, no matter how successful they become, that they're still the same people that they were back when they first started. And something about that really touches me. Yeah.
It's a little worrying when Oda's like talking to Shimabukuro, when you cut down your sleeping down 2 hours, it keeps your mind sharp, and Shimabukuro is like, no, that's the opposite of the words, what are you doing?
I related to that so hard, because my best friend kind of sort of, not the exact mentality, but has this sort of mentality where it's like, sometimes I question her schedule with things, with her life and everything, and I'm like, how do you, like, when do you find the time to sleep? And she'll be like, oh, well, I don't sleep because, like, why, like, if I sleep, I feel like I would rather get more stuff done than sleep. And I'm like, but you eventually need to sleep.
Yeah. I tried going on 2 hours of sleep for a few days once, and I almost died. So
oh, no.
don't recommend it.
Yeah, stop doing that, Sid.
Yeah.
I can't even function on anything less than like 6 hours of sleep, let alone 2 hours, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, Oda is really working himself very hard. I think that's why it's a good thing that he like takes breaks pretty frequently now, at least 1 week breaks. You know, they kind of got into a groove where he does like, 3 chapters a month and then takes a week off, which I think is very healthy. And there are a lot of other mangaka that probably could benefit from that schedule. I mean, we've seen like this year, like a lot of mangaka from have taken like sudden breaks just because the burden of doing like a weekly manga is just really difficult.
Yeah, like that's something I feel like we report on Manga Mavericks like almost every other episode. I feel like we have at least one story where it's like, oh, the author of such and such series has to take a break for like a week, or oh, hey, they have to take a break for like indefinitely, kind of like with Ashihara with World Trigger and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And it's all like, especially in cases like that, it's always really, I always feel incredibly terrible when we have to like talk about that kind of thing, because it is kind of like, it is discouraging to hear that kind of thing sometimes.
Yeah. But Oda's had his share of health problems in the last couple of years, but it seems like he's still like very chipper and like very excited about working the series, so he doesn't have to God, hopefully he won't end up like Tagashi complaining about his back problems and being physically in pain all the time. But like I admire Oda just so much. Like he is definitely one of my biggest heroes and has been for like over 10 years.
You can't say the guy doesn't work hard.
Oh no, you just look at any given chapter of One Piece, and even nowadays when you can see sometimes that like there's some scribbly moments, but just the level of detail in every chapter of One Piece, it's mind blowing. It's just there's like no weekly shonen manga that has as much like detail, as many things going on in it week per week as One Piece does artistically.
I think I could agree with that. Yeah.
Yep, that's how I feel. Thorough is the word I would use.
Yes.
Like even when he's getting scribbly, just like the amount of lines you have to draw for your average Oda design, is pretty time consuming, and the fact that all of his characters are drawn specifically to look kind of like weirdly 3-dimensional. Like I've just been looking at Big Mom every week, and it's just like, man, there's a lot of little things you have to do just to make sure that like she keeps that very specific like look and shape to her. Yeah,
like Oda's designs can look deceptively simple, but they are actually like, they really require like the masterclass level of talent as an artist that he has to like make them feel so believable and 3-dimensional. It really is just astonishing.
Oh yeah.
But we have a lot of love for Oda. We have a lot of love for One Piece, but I just kind of wanted to talk about now how our opinions of One Piece, like as a whole, might have changed over the years from when we were first getting into it to how we are now as fans. And I want to ask that of you guys, because I know for both of you, One Piece is probably up there as like one of your favorite manga. I know, Colton, that it is your favorite.
It is. So yeah, I get this question asked me all the time because I would say personally I'm a bigger fan of Gintama than I am of One Piece. But as much as I love One Piece, I think it's just because Gintama resonates with me just so much more personally now that I've grown a little older. Like I have this thing where I feel like I'm glad I got into One Piece when I did, because One Piece is obviously sometimes I and I understand why, because the thing with One Piece is that One Piece it's very shonen, and it's very good at being shonen, but there are every once in a while sometimes I think that like compared to other shonen manga, like Gintama, where it's like, they're not afraid to kind of step outside their demo for a little bit and not afraid to delve into slightly more mature writing. And again, this is not a knock against One Piece. This is just these are just my observations as a manga fan and a Jump fan for over 10 years at this point. Read a lot of Jump manga, but I don't know. Like, I don't really know how to exactly work my thoughts here. Like, I'm glad I got into One Piece when I did, because I think One Piece is a great thing to grow up with and is a great thing to get into when you are, of the age where Jump is technically targeting its audience at. Whereas Gintama, I'm glad I got into. Like, I got into Gintama as I was, as I was on my way out of high school, as I was sort of becoming an adult. And, Gintama I would consider a very good, like, sort of adult shonen, where it's like, it is a shonen manga, and that is what it is at its heart, but it's also not afraid to delve into a lot of very mature ideas that I really don't think you see in a lot of shonen manga, personally. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love it so much, is because it kind of is its own thing. But trying to remember where exactly I was going with this. So yeah, I get asked all the time, like, oh, well, Gintama is your favorite anime. How come it's not your favorite manga? Well, personally, is, because I also host Life Lessons, the Gintama Manga Cast, where I go through the Gintama manga, from the beginning. And, from what I've read of the manga, I haven't read all of it, but from what I've read of it, I love the Gintama anime so much because I feel like it really, what's the word I'm looking for? It really kind of utilizes its source material very well, whereas Gintama, the manga, as a comic, I don't feel like it utilizes its medium as much as its anime counterpart does. So that's why I prefer the anime overall, which is why, as a comic, I definitely prefer One Piece, because just because of how much work goes into the world building, the characters, and just how, like Sam said, thorough the art is. And, like, there's just I feel like Oda, compared to Sorachi in particular, really takes advantage of his medium so much more, in my opinion. And, in terms of just other comic creators, people who create manga or whatnot, I really feel like there are so many artists that, as much as I love Sorachi as a creator and as a person, I feel like there are people, especially in Jump, that I feel like I would consider better artists, personally. Like, I would put, just to name a few, like, I would put people like Yusuke Murata and Kentaro Miura above Sorachi in terms of, like, how amazingly thorough an artist they can be. Mm. So, yeah, like, One Piece is definitely, despite, because I guess I have such a weird, like, relationship with One Piece nowadays, where it's like, like I said, back when I was in high school, I feel like that's when I had the most passion for it. That's when I felt the most passion for it. And, I was like many who, at the time thought, Oda's so great, like, he can't do anything wrong. One Piece is totally perfect, where, as much as I love One Piece, I don't necessarily think that way about the series now. And I feel like it was around the time skip where the more I read it and the more I discussed it with other people, that I thought, yeah, there's some parts of One Piece that, while I understand, like stuff like, female representation and whatnot, I just feel like, there are certain things about One Piece I didn't notice when I first got into it, that now, after a certain point in the series, I start to notice more and more as I grow up. And that things I kind of have more of a problem with now, but, I still love the series overall. And obviously, if I didn't love it, I would not be reading it week to week and supporting it. But basically, my point is I'm more aware of certain problems that I have with the series overall. But honestly, talking about it now, I feel like you guys are kind of reigniting my passion for it a little bit.
That's what I've noticed too, that when you start talking about, like, One Piece, like, you start remembering everything that's great about it, and, like, you kind of rekindle your passion. I definitely feel that, like, whenever I get into, like, a serious conversation about the series with someone, that, like, it swirls up a desire, it swirls up memories, and, like, gets me into the fanboy spirit again. But, Sam, I kind of want to hear, like, how have your opinions of One Piece changed over the years?
Okay, so before One Piece, I was all about Dragon Ball Z, right? Mm-hmm. Like Dragon Ball Z was the center of my universe. Like, that phrase made so much sense to me as a kid. Like it just felt like that was like so core to who I was. And so when I fell in love with One Piece and I had this revelation, like, oh no, I think I like One Piece more than Dragon Ball Z. Like it was like this real like crisis of identity. But I got over it. The ride I had with One Piece, like when it really like penetrated me, like when it really like got down, and the Robin's I Want to Live scene is probably the moment where I was like, okay, I am dedicated to this show for the rest of my goddamn life. The fact that I got a show that was so like emotional and so positive at that age of my life, like I was probably like 15 or so when I was first really getting into it. Then followed up with just like the high of being a fan of something that was as massive as it was in Japan, like all the you know the Strong World, the war, the time skip, repeating all those things again in the anime, hearing about all the crazy merchandise that was going on in Japan, being a fan of the One Piece podcast, like that was a very unique high where you felt like you were winning by being a One Piece fan. The ride I had catching up with One Piece and the ride, just all the nostalgic memories that I formed watching it, they're really down deep in my brain right now. Like they're just, it's just the kind of thing where it's like, they're forever a part of me. It's forever this thing where like I just catching up multiple times, like even as a kid, I was telling myself, I don't ever want to take this for granted. Like I know I will never feel this way about a show again. That's an attitude that still sticks with me like really strongly today. If there's one, the big thing that's changed is sort of, I don't really approach Oda like he's like this god who can do no wrong now. Mm-hmm. And my main grievance is that like all the arcs of the new world so far, like they're all designed to kind of bleed into each other so much, but it also means that there's been fewer chances for like really dramatic like upsets in like the bigger picture of One Piece. Like we're still building up to like a Marineford level thing when I think we should have built up to another one already by now, but that's really about it. Like my opinions on One Piece haven't changed a whole lot.
I'm in a very similar position to you, Sam, in that Dragon Ball was also the center of my world for a long time, and I still think, even though there are other series I would prefer over it, or I say are my favorites over it, that it still like holds like a special place. And One Piece is also kind of like that. There was a time in my life that One Piece was my absolute most favorite thing ever, and I was like incredibly obsessed with it, and my life was One Piece. One Piece was also the center of my world for a long time.
Same.
And it's not quite like that anymore. I don't feel as strongly as I do about One Piece. I don't think Oda is as like an untouchable, perfect storyteller as I used to. But all the same, I think One Piece as a series is an incredible feat of imagination and creativity, and this just incredible epic that I just really admire and respect. And I get frustrated with the series sometimes. I got frustrated during Fishman Island. I actually stopped reading for I stopped reading for a few weeks.
I loved Fishman Island.
Yeah, I just stopped reading for a few months during Fishman Island because I don't know, I just lost interest during that time, but I got back into it.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I must be a trooper then, because I read that entire thing week to week without stopping, even though I didn't feel as strongly about that arc as I did other arcs. That was definitely a low point for the series in me. Like, reading it week to week, I didn't think was fun. But I do wonder... Mm-hmm. But personally, I haven't revisited that arc since I read it week to week. So I really do wonder how I would feel if I read it all in a marathon, like, at this point in time.
I have revisited it, and my opinion of it is a little better than it used to be. But I do think it's the weakest arc in the series, but it's not like a bad arc necessarily. It just has some problems.
I think it's like genuinely one of the most interesting ones. Like the way that it approaches its like that's One Piece trying to touch more mature material. It's telling like a racism story, but like a kind of a weirdly unique one that isn't one that I've seen before. I think that I think it's big like it's big kind of emotional climaxes are really good where like Fukuboshi's like shouting like, just destroy it, set it all back to zero, yada yada. I thought that was really strong.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that the themes and ideas explored in that arc were very interesting. I guess in terms of the dramatic stakes, I just wasn't as invested in, I guess, the conflict. I just didn't think Cody Jones and
but I think that's okay because it's a break between, because this is the way that One Piece operates. This is why I always thought was so like brilliant about like the first half of One Piece is that you would have like this massive franchise changing arc, like everything you thought you knew about what was possible in One Piece changes at like Arlong, at Alabasta, at Enies Lobby, at Marineford, right? And then in between those, there are like still epic, but like more self-contained stories that sort of pace the whole franchise out in general. Like they're kind of these, like they're allowed to be epic, but because they're not affecting the world building as much, they kind of feel like these kind of breathing breaks. And that's kind of what Fishman Island is after Marineford, I think.
I would agree with that. And, I don't think it was necessarily a wrong thing to do, to just have like a villainous team that wasn't like that big a threat to the Straw Hats, to show off like much stronger they have gotten and stuff. But it's just, I don't think it's a bad arc anymore. I don't feel as engaged with it for just a couple small reasons here and there. But I do think that it serves a great point. It serves its purpose in the story very well.
You know what I think it is? I think part of the reason why so many people were probably disappointed with Fishman Island probably also has to do with the fact that the story had been kind of sort of, in a sense, kind of hyping up this island for actually a pretty long time. Yeah. Like, the
couple of years.
Yeah, the characters had been mentioning, this point in the story, this island in particular, since post Enies Lobby, if I remember correctly.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it probably has to do with that, where it's like, probably a lot of people were looking forward to, finally getting to Fishman Island and like what kind of story arc we would get out of that. And I can't help but think that people probably hyped themselves maybe a bit too much, possibly because of that, because of how long we had been waiting to get to that point in the story. So maybe people's expectations were just probably a bit higher than they should have been, possibly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, there was just so much build up to Fishman Island that people are expecting something of grander scale than what we got. And it didn't also help that it happened after the time skip, and people were looking forward to seeing, like, the Straw Hat crew back in action. And, they got, like, great chances to show off during that arc. But like they also weren't like the focus necessarily. Like they took a backseat to the kind of politics going on in Fishman Island, and then Luffy was still more center stage among the rest of the crew.
I feel like if you look at Fishman Island as more of a transitionary arc into the new world, I feel like I'm not as critical of it if I look at it from that sense, possibly.
Yeah.
And I'll be super interested in how people feel about it after Whole Cake Island, after Jinbei joins, after the Reverie, after Fishman Island actually gets destroyed, whenever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, but just to veer back, I mean, Fishman Island actually wasn't like, kind of like broke the chains of like me thinking One Piece was untouchable. Actually, it was actually during Dressrosa where I was really getting a little weary of like everything that was going on, just because the arc was going on so long. There were moments in the arc that I wasn't agreeing with. I didn't like how half the Straw Hats were like jettisoned halfway into the arc. I wasn't particularly a fan of like how Usopp was handled. There was a lot of moments during that arc that like really kind of tore down on me, even though I really wanted to love that arc because I was super excited for Doflamingo. I actually like Law. I thought he could be interesting. I still like him, but he's not. I don't. His flashback was more about Corazon than him. So it's not like it didn't really make a good case if you didn't like Law to like him better.
I feel like he's a more interesting character than people give him credit for. But can I just say, Sid, when this is not an exaggeration, when people just mention the word Dressrosa, my body just like feels fatigued just thinking about it. Like, I don't know if you heard, but as soon as you mentioned Dressrosa, I'm just like, oh, okay. Suddenly I feel so tired just thinking about it. Yeah, that was, if anything, I felt like Dressrosa was probably the arc I liked reading weekly the least.
Yeah. It's basically 100 chapters. It's like a ninth of the series.
It's like 10, 11 volumes, I think.
Yeah, so, it is like an insanely huge portion of the story, and it is really important. A lot of important things happen during that arc, but just reading it, like, over the course of 2 years, there was a lot of, times when, like, you were just
it was longer than that
waiting
with
for it to
all
end.
the breaks Oda took.
That's true.
Yeah,
it was more like 2.5, even close to 3 years. And it was a long story, but, so that was, like, during that stretch of time, it was also, like, just expanding my knowledge of other series. I was getting into anime and manga again, kind of in a renaissance in a big way. So I was exposing myself to more stuff, and I just think One Piece just wasn't like holding up to like what all the other things I was getting into at the time. So I was just falling out of it a little bit, and so now I'm kind of just been rejuvenated as a fan thanks to the current stuff on Whole Cake Island.
Oh my god.
And thanks to revisiting like the series in piecemeal form time to time, seeing One Piece Film Gold earlier this year. Like, there have been many, many things that just keep bringing me back to One Piece and remembering just how great it is and how much it means to me and why I used to love it as much as I did and why I still love it now. And so while I'm not sure where One Piece is in terms of being one of my favorite series, I feel I need to reread it to like determine like how, if it would, like, I would still consider it one of my all-time favorite series. It is still one of the most important series to me in terms of like how I've developed, in terms of what I think of as great storytelling, in terms of what I aspire to in terms of artwork, and just in terms of like what I think, is a great manga just in general. So One Piece really does mean a whole lot to me, and it has for the last 12 years. It's been a huge formative part of my life, and I have so many memories about it that I just hold on to. So One Piece isn't the untouchable thing that it used to be for me, but it's still an extremely important emotional thing for me.
One Piece definitely has its merits that I will always continue to defend from people who are like, oh, it's not that good, like, why don't white people like this?
Yeah, and I'm exposed to a crowd like that pretty often. There's this guy I know who thinks One Piece is a failure in North America because it keeps not doing well on TV and because it's not necessarily a mega hit in sales for which isn't really that true. It is one of Wiz's best-selling manga, but
there's more going on with that than just, it doesn't do well on TV,
But, there are some people I've been around who really do not like One Piece, and they revel in whatever failure they see it having or whatever. But, I just look back at One Piece and I think about everything that's great about it, and it's like, I don't care, like, what the naysayers think, or like I don't care that One Piece will never be as popular as something like Dragon Ball or Naruto in the West necessarily. Like, the One Piece fandom is like thriving. It is stronger than it's ever been, and One Piece as a series is, this is a great time to be a fan. There's just so much going on for One Piece. The story is in a great place. Like, One Piece is a series that just keeps rewarding you, and it has been for the last 12 years I've been a fan of it. And I think that however long it goes on, it'll just continue to be enjoyable, and then this fandom will continue to be extremely strong and passionate and close, and it just has so much life left in it. And I just love reading it and discussing it and being a part of it.
Yeah, I definitely want to go on record and say that Whole Cake Island has probably been the most engaged I've felt with One Piece since the start of the time skip, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Punk Hazard, I actually enjoyed.
Yeah, I
enjoyed reading week to week, but to me personally, this arc has been so much better, so much more interesting, and how all of the double crossing going on, and like I kind of agree with Steven, the translator for One Piece and the Viz Jump, that like Whole Cake Island is very like Breaking Bad, and how it's all like put together and planned, and like it's just it's setting up so many like there's so many like build-ups to look forward to see like the payoffs too, and it's just I've actually enjoyed reading this arc week to week.
Yeah, so, I mean, One Piece means a lot to all three of us, and it's something that we'll carry with us for the rest of our lives.
I'm gonna probably cry when it ends, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be like, when Naruto ended, and I wasn't even that big a fan of Naruto for, so long, and I actually was excited that, oh my god, finally this shit is ending. But like, when it did end, I stepped back and I realized, Naruto, that had been a part of my life for 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years. It's gone now. It didn't really go away, but it felt at the time, it was like, wow, this series, as much as I stopped caring about it for a long time, it really did mean a lot to me at one point. I had so many memories of it, and it was important to me. And One Piece, I have even stronger feelings, and I'm still into One Piece. And yeah, when One Piece does end, I am going to it's just going to be like one of those moments where it's like, wow, like this was a part of me for so long. And I don't think One Piece will ever really go away, even if the main manga ends, like kind of like Dragon Ball and Naruto. It's still going to like continue on in some form, but
Luffy's gonna have a son named Boofy, and there's gonna be a new spin-off called Two Piece, the Reckoning, and it'll be a monthly series of Jump, and it'll go on for like another 5 years or something.
And let's not forget the American TV show.
But yeah, so like One Piece, it is a part of me, and I think for a lot of people, it's a part of them. It's a part of like just their daily lives at this point, and it's like when it's kind of like I feel like for a lot of people, when The Simpsons ends, they're gonna be like, "Wow, I can't believe it. I never thought this would end." Like I think a lot of us will have that same reaction when One Piece ends.
It's gonna be weird to have it gone.
Yeah, it'll be weird to live in a post One Piece world.
Hell, I feel like you and me, Sid, in particular, we felt that way about kind of Kochikame when that ended, and we barely
read Kochikame, but like you just knew like its legacy, and you knew like how important it was, and when you knew that Kochikame leaving, that is a huge deal. Thinking about like One Piece might not run as long as Kochikame, who knows, but the impact that One Piece has had on the world of manga, the impact it's had internationally, it's just so much more staggering, and that will have incredibly like lasting ramifications. And like,
oh yeah,
it's just you don't know how to think about that. Think about like living without One Piece being around, but again, it will always be around, but just the main manga.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, we've talked a lot about, what One Piece means to us, and, we've all been in it for just so long, like, over a decade. But, even though One Piece is going on 20 years, there still might be people out there who aren't into it yet. And so I wanted to kind of, ask your guys' opinions of, like, how you would recommend people to get into One Piece.
Oh, yeah, this is kind of hard because, like, I think the biggest problem with getting new people into One Piece is that the longer it goes on, the more it is to consume, which, depending on what kind of person you are, will either be a good thing or a bad thing. Because, I constantly talk about this kind of thing, too, where it's like, I get on people who are like, when they say something like, oh, I don't want to get into such and such because it's so long, I just don't have the time. And it's like, well, like, if you don't think you'll have an interest in it, like, that's one thing. But if it's like, if you're not going to get into something because it's, like, long, like, something as long as One Piece or I kind of understand, but it's like, you know, you don't have to like binge watch it or binge read it. You can watch like a bit at a time. Like you're not exactly expected to like watch all of it in one sitting. Like I that's the impression I get from people, but you know, that's just me personally.
I think binge watching is what a lot of people want. Like when I like every week I like to like kind of browse the Crunchyroll comments on the newest episode, and a lot of the time you always like every week you see someone who's just caught up after watching it for like a couple of months. Like people like having something that they can just watch in the background for months.
Yeah.
And then they're still sad when it's over when they catch up.
Yeah, that just goes back to what I'm saying, because you know I know people who, you know, don't like to binge watch things because they feel like, you know, if they watch too much of something at a time, like every episode starts to like blur together, and they have trouble like remembering what exactly happened in what episode or whatnot. And you know, I'm the kind of guy who just doesn't have the attention span to binge watch things. Like if I really like something, nowadays I'll probably watch like 3 or 4 episodes and then I'll feel like moving on to something else. Like it's very rare that I binge watch anything. Like I think the biggest thing I binge watch, you know, a couple years ago was Gintama. Like, you know, I got into that series so much at one point that I ended up watching 15 episodes in a row and didn't think anything of it because I just loved it so much. You know, stuff like that and BoJack Horseman have really been the only things I've been watched recently. And again, like just me speaking personally, I'm not a huge binge watcher, so I know people who just don't have the attention span for it, and I think that's okay. And I feel like because binge watching is such a normal thing for a lot of people, that I feel like people have this weird idea that like they feel the need to binge watch something. So, and if they don't have the attention span for it, they just won't bother getting into something. At least those are just my experiences personally.
Yeah, I think people have this misconception with getting into a long running series like One Piece that, you know, if they binge it, that they need to do it like all at once, or they need to like get through all of the series as quickly as possible, but they don't need to do that. You can take your time getting into One Piece.
Exactly.
It'll be there, but it'll be there, you know. It's not going anywhere. You can just take your time and catch up at your own pace, and that's perfectly fine. Lord GTZ, my brother, you know, he got into Detective Conan. He caught up with that series just over the course of, 2 years. You know, you can take as long as you need to catch up with something. You know, you don't have to, like, push yourself to get into it as fast as possible. I know that the reason people wanted to get into it as fast as possible is because they just want to be a part of the conversation. But I think just the experience of going through the series and taking your time and enjoying it is just far more important.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't understand the need to. Well, I guess that's not true. Sometimes I do understand feel the need to be current, and then other times I don't, because personally I'm just at that point where I'm like, I'm just gonna get to things at my own pace, and I'm fine with, like, especially with Detective Conan, I'm fine with just kind of going at my own pace and being caught up with it whenever I get caught up on it.
Now, I kind of wanted to hear your guys' opinion. Would you recommend the manga over the anime? Which would be the method that you would recommend people try more to get into One Piece?
I want to hear from Sam first, because I know, Sam, from listening to the One Piece podcast, you head the anime recaps nowadays, and I know you... I feel like out of most of the crew on the show, you are probably the most positive person.
Right.
You have the most positive opinions about the anime, so I want to hear what you have to say.
My general suggestion is that people start with the anime, watch it as long as they're still having fun, and then when they just like really have that need to get caught up, jump to the manga.
I totally agree with that. Like, personally, I would say, if you wanted to start with the anime, I want to say, in my personal opinion, I feel like where the anime starts to kind of dip in quality and kind of fluctuates in quality, to me, is around, I would say, probably around Impel Down.
Well, Impel Down was just like a real like that. They were they were stretched real thin there.
Yeah.
Like Impel Down, I think was around the first time I had noticed like, this is taking a lot longer than I think it should, right? And I mean, like, there's still stretches of episodes that I know people aren't a fan of. Like, I know there are episodes of Enies Lobby that people aren't a fan of, and I know people are kind of the opinion, at least in my experience, that arc kind of drags itself too. But I don't know.
Well, this is part of my the One Piece anime goes through cycles. Like, it'll have a phase where it's just like really just exhausted and it just like clearly needs a break, but they don't have a break.
Yeah.
But then it picks back up and then it's really good for a while. I think back to like Enies Lobby and like how slow it gets there, and yet how much that did not stop me from enjoying the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll hear from people who have not read the manga and still like from episode 1 catch up all the way up to the current stuff. And there are moments in the current stuff where I'm like, man, I kind of wish I could like vicariously have that experience where, which is part of the reason why I'm still so nice on the anime and why I do the anime recap, is because I want that vicarious experience of like, what does a person who's still enjoying it going through these parts of the series, what kind of experience are they having?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that, if people want to try the anime, they should go with it, and they should watch it as long as, they have patience for the pacing. I have a lot of fondness for, like, the first 206 episodes, and I can still, like, go back to those and, like, rewatch them and, like, not be bothered by how they're paced. But
yeah,
there are stuff after, like, the post-HD widescreen stuff. Oh, starting with Davy Back fight. Like Sam says, there are cycles of when it's like really good and like when it's not so great in terms of pacing and animation and stuff. But there have been like great moments just recently in the anime that like great episodes still to this day. So the anime isn't like it hasn't become terrible or anything. You can still have some fun with it, but again, it goes through cycles. And then if you just want or care about like getting caught up in the story and experiencing it as fast as possible, then the manga is probably your best avenue, because that is, you can control the pace that you read it even much better that way, because you read at your own pace and you're not beholden to sitting through 24-minute episodes.
There is that concern, though, then, like, if you're the kind of person who likes to stick to the legal avenues, you can watch the anime for very cheap, and you can read the manga for quite a bit of money. Ends up being the problem.
That's true. I mean, it's really going to all depend on how robust your local library system is. I know I'm much in a better place in terms of that than some Colton is.
Yeah, my library selection is shit, frankly, so... I mean, outside of having all of Toriko for some reason, so if I ever want to reread Toriko, there's that. But yeah, Sid definitely has it better than I do on that front.
I'm a big fan of Viz's like big 24-volume boxes, which I think they sell like on average for like $100 a box now.
They're a great deal, and I would definitely recommend people, seek those out if they want to like read a large chunk of One Piece and get it for a really good price. And those box sets are like organized, to contain like complete arcs. So like the first set will go up, get you through the entire like Baroque work saga, and then the second you'll get through like everything up to Enies Lobby, and then the third box set is through Punk Hazard.
The second box has all of Skypiea and the Water 7 saga, which is my favorite stuff.
Yeah.
So.
You get a lot of story in each of those box sets for a good price. So if you're looking to buy One Piece in order to read it, then those are great deals. And then of course, they're like Casey was kind of talking about with MHA on Twitter recently. Like there is a bit of like a gap in terms of like volume releases of Shonen Jump stuff and what's happening in current issues of Jump. So that is a concern sometimes, but you can still get caught up, mostly pretty easily without too much like of a gap between like where the latest volume Wiz has put out is to what the latest chapter is in Shonen Jump. Just like 50 chapters or so behind. But yeah, there are many ways to try and get into One Piece, and there's like no one correct way. I mean, as we all described our story, we all had like our different like ways of kind of getting into One Piece, and there are plenty of ways to consume this series. So just do whatever method that suits you best.
I mean, if I had to be the purist here, because I can't help it, I would personally just recommend the manga, but like I do agree with Sid that it really all depends on you and probably your financial situation and what kind of pace you want to go with in terms of consuming the story. There are a lot of factors involved, so
right. But I don't want to like dismiss people from watching the anime because as I was discussing before with like the Arlong Park stuff, the anime does add things to the material that are really cool and that are like really iconic, especially the early stuff. For me, there's a lot of things that the anime does with music, with voice acting, and like how they pace and frame certain scenes to just make the material come to life in even grander fashion. So yeah. I do think the anime is worth watching, and it is like a perfectly justifiable way to consume this series, even if like the manga in terms of consistency is more of a higher quality.
Yeah, and if you really feel like like me when I think I stopped watching the anime probably around I want to say the beginning of Punk Hazard. Like there was just a time where like I stopped watching the anime for like a month or two, just because I didn't get a chance to like watch it weekly, and I had a couple episodes to keep up with, and like I kept watching, I was like, yeah, like I think I just finally hit my breaking point where I'm just like, you know what, I'm kind of tired of this pace. Like I'm just gonna stick to the manga, and and I think it's totally fine to feel that way too, because I don't want to necessarily just shit all over the anime because it does have its good points, and I don't want to devalue those, but just don't feel bad if you feel like you're just not into the anime anymore, but you still want to experience the story. Don't feel bad about making the transition.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays I don't keep up with the anime every week, but I read Sam's reviews, and if he said when he says some really cool things about like what happened in the episode, I'm like, yeah, I'll watch this episode. So I'm really grateful for your reviews for that, Sam.
Aww.
And even me in particular, like I sometimes when I hear buzz about an episode, like from Sam and everybody else over at the One Piece podcast, they talk about it enough. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll check out the episode, see what's up, see what they're talking about. And yeah, there have been a few episodes here and there that I've caught that I'm like, yeah, this is actually pretty good. Like the episode with Big Mom's like musical entrance was actually pretty good, and I think the episode with the other half of the crew in Zo, or during the point where we don't know that that they're on Zo in particular, and the introduction to Kaido, like stuff like that. I think from what I've been seeing, has been handled pretty well as far as the anime goes, and I really enjoyed those episodes.
So yeah, One Piece is still pretty great. And so to kind of wrap up our discussion before we head into Q&As here, I just want to hear everyone's thoughts on the state of One Piece as it is in North America. Do you think that we're in a great place right now? Do you think we're in a renaissance of One Piece? Just how do you feel as a One Piece fan today?
I feel pretty good. People are really bummed about the whole Toonami thing. Mm. But I don't know. I guess I just don't care that much.
No, yeah, I feel the same way because, I was really excited to hear that One Piece had finally come back to Toonami, and that was really cool at the time. But it's also coupled with the fact that I just kind of fell out of Toonami after a while. I either because of the general fandom or because I a lot of the stuff they air on Toonami, I could just watch elsewhere. I don't need Toonami. Toonami is a thing I'm personally okay with just kind of leaving in my past and in my childhood. Something I grew up with, something that I have nostalgia for, but I don't need it anymore.
I'm still very much current with the Toonami fandom, and I'm still pretty actively engaged with what goes on with Toonami. But what Toonami represents and its purpose is just so much different now. Because Toonami, like a show being on there, it isn't like this big like deal of exposure. It isn't like necessarily going to get a show in more eyes and introduce them into this thing than One Piece just being like on Crunchyroll or just being available like on Hulu or like whatever streaming site is, because people use those more.
It's always at the top at Crunchyroll. And I think like a show being popular because of the internet, I think that's okay.
That's a good thing.
I mean, the appeal of Toonami as it is nowadays is just the community of fans around Toonami. It's just the experience of like, gathering around and talking about the shows on social media as they air every Saturday night as the block goes through. And that's a lot of fun, but it's not like anime being on TV is not a make or break point for its success anymore, especially in the case of One Piece.
Especially not one episode a week in the middle of the night.
Yeah, at 2 a.m.
Toonami doesn't really have that kind of like, to me anyway, it doesn't have that kind of, that power of exposure that it had back in the day.
Yeah. And, I was extremely excited when Toonami came back in 2013. I remember when I heard the news, I literally rolled on the floor like giddy. Like, I literally was rolling on the floor. I was that excited. That was, like, the greatest thing that had happened to me in a while. And I was super excited about it the first couple weeks. And I was, like, watching it every night and stuff. But, until, like, life got in the way and I just couldn't stay up that late on Saturday nights anymore. I had to do, work on Saturday nights instead of watching TV. But, again, it's like anime being on TV is cool. One Piece being on TV, the anime would have been nice, but, it doesn't need it anymore. And I think the series is in a great place. I think, it is one of the most popular anime in North America. You might not see as many, people outside the anime fandom know about it as they would Dragon Ball Z or Attack on Titan. But among, like, anime in general, it is up there. It is, like, big. You'll go to conventions. It's, like, still incredibly well cosplayed.
It's not this, like, unknown thing as much anymore.
Not at all.
People are at least aware of it, which I think is good.
And it's night and day compared to where it was, every year before it.
Yep.
Every year before now, its exposure has been significantly less. It's like it's the most popular it's ever been, I think, like without a doubt.
Yeah, I think a great mark of that is One Piece Film Gold, that theatrical release. I went to screenings in New York City. I went to 2 of them, and both times, like, it was a pretty packed theater. Like it was popular. It's a popular series, and it's not like those theaters are as packed as like when I went to see the Sailor Moon or Yu-Gi-Oh movie, but it was still like sizable. So One Piece is like it draws a crowd, and people are into it, and the fandom is in a really strong place, and I think that it's only going to grow as the years go by.
My only gripe is. I hope that at some point people are more aware of where they can read the manga legally. But that's the one thing I think that I think needs to be fixed at some point. That I hope we can improve upon.
Yeah, the One Piece podcast did a great article about supporting the official release that I'll also link in the episode description here. But yeah, definitely go and subscribe to Shonen Jump to support the One Piece manga, because Stephen Paul does great quality translations, and it's just the best way to read One Piece. You won't get mistakes like in the scans recently. I heard like they translated Big Mom's name as Charlotte Rin because of a like typo or whatever. So you don't get stuff like that.
And you won't get references that feel out of place in the world of One Piece, like to Martha Stewart and to Netflix and Chill. And
yeah.
Wait, did they say Netflix and Chill once?
No.
It wasn't that exact thing. I remember it was during Zoe where like a henchman or something was like it made a reference to that meme or whatever, and it was like, okay, that's dumb. You shouldn't have done that. Like that doesn't make sense in this world. It feels out of place. Like that's something the 4Kids dub would do, maybe, but
yeah.
Well, that's too sexual in nature for 4Kids.
I
Maybe,
don't know.
but yeah.
They probably don't actually They probably wouldn't actually understand the connotations. I've heard.
Probably not.
I remember they made some jokes in that dub that made me turn my head.
But yeah, I mean, as far as One Piece's popularity goes, we could be just before another big boom with this TV show.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yep, it's never been a more exciting time to be a One Piece fan, I feel.
I don't know, 2010 was pretty incredible.
Yeah, or 2007, but yeah, 2008. 2010. That probably was the peak. I mean, we have sales data to reflect that in Japan. So,
yep.
But yeah. So I guess that does it for just our main One Piece discussion. And now we'll go into some questions that my good friend Dr. Insatsuken asked us over on Animation Revelation. The first one of these being, roughly how much longer do you think the series will run before Oda finally concludes it? Will it be
another 20 years?
Yeah, he asks, will it be sticking around for a 30th anniversary, or do you believe it'll wrap up before that? I can't really say myself, because I think that it's hard to predict where we are in terms of the end game, because we're building up to something big, but we still have to, see how long the Wano arc will go, and there's still so much more that could happen. So, I mean, it could be like as short as 5 years. It could be as long as 20 years, like, Colton just joked about. But who knows?
I think 120 volumes is what we're aiming for.
That's right. I believe, like, there was an editor who recently came out and said that, Oda was about 60% of the way through it. So, probably at 20 years or less.
How long was Kochikame?
40 years.
But like how many volumes?
Oh,
like,
that was about 200.
Right?
That was actually exactly 200.
Yeah, 200.
What? I was gonna say.
I don't know. Like, as much as I joke, like, I think it's totally possible that One Piece will run for 30 years and we'll actually see a 30th anniversary. But I also think there is a chance it could end before that. But I mean, you never know. And Sid brings up all the percentages that we get from either Oda or the editor sometimes. Those I try not to take at face value, because those can always change, and they have. So, like, I'm pretty sure Oda said at one point that Alabasta was the halfway point, and obviously that's not true anymore.
Yeah. So nothing is set in stone. So really, who knows? Just enjoy the ride.
Pretty much, let's just enjoy it while it's here.
Mm-hmm. So his next question is, with the upcoming Wano Kuni arc potentially being the biggest event in the series since the Summit War at Marineford, is anyone expecting any major character deaths, sans flashbacks, of course, to go down, similar with what happened with Ace and Whitebeard? I'm not sure. I mean, I guess...
That's a good question.
During Wano Kuni, I'm not really sure who might die, if anyone. I feel like Shanks might die at some point in a fight with, either Kaido or Blackbeard. But outside of Shanks, I don't know what other character in One Piece I would expect to die, unless Oda throws us a curveball.
Well, I guess just on the topic of character death, and I know Sam and I have talked about this before, and I know he disagrees with me, but I still think it would make sense if at some point possibly Usopp had a death at one point, because hear me out, because I think
you can't hear it, but I'm shaking my head.
Because here's the thing, like, it makes sense to me that, like, because what's Usopp's whole thing? He wants to be the bravest warrior in the sea or whatnot, and I think it would make sense if, like imagine if Usopp did die, and people recounted the legendary tales of Captain Usopp and his army of 80,000 men or whatever the number was, and like I just really like the idea of, I don't want Usopp to die, but like if that were to happen, I would just hope that his legacy lives on through his tall tales. Like, I don't know, something about that idea just really appeals to me. Like, I like that romanticized aspect about it.
I don't think he needs to die for a legacy or myths to be spread about around him. I mean, that's already kind of happening now. That happened in Dressrosa. It's happening with Buggy right now, too, so.
That's true.
I like the idea that Usopp might be like the narrator or something this whole time.
That would be great. So, any other characters we might think could die at some point?
It's interesting because I think I kind of think something that hurts like that needs to happen soon because the series just kind of feels a little fangless right now.
Yeah.
But I don't know who it would be. I mean, Kaido wants to die, so who knows?
I'm just kind of waiting for Blackbeard to show up at this point because I feel like that has to happen soon. I feel like that's coming up.
That'll be a big deal when he does. And again, I feel like Shanks will be a character that dies because that will really hurt Luffy.
What if Sabo dies for real this time?
That's another good candidate. I guess we'll have to see. Maybe which one of those two or both of them get killed.
Yeah, I can't really think of anybody in particular during Wano that I think would be ripe for a character death is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Law, I don't know.
Maybe Kinemon, or to be tragic for Momonosuke, or something like that.
Actually, you know what? That would hurt a little bit, actually.
Yeah. But, there's a lot of possibilities out there, but nothing quite definite, or at least nothing that I'd expect in Wano Kuni for sure. But moving on, EK's next question is, of all the ongoing recurring characters, stories, and mysteries that have persisted in One Piece throughout its 2-decade-long run, which as of yet unresolved plot thread do you most want to see unfold?
Oh, I really want to know what the thing was at the end of Thriller Bark in the fog.
That's the one I want to stay a mystery, personally. For a while, I was sure that would, but at this point, I feel like that might... We probably would find out what that is. I don't need to see what it is, but...
For me, it's just the history of the world, continue to explore that and get closure on that. And again, I want to see the Straw Hats go to the moon at some point. And that'd be fun.
I guess other than that, I'd eventually love to see Vegapunk, but I'm sure most of the fandom does.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I want the full, scientist, backstory. They all seem to know each other, Caesar and Judge and Vegapunk. There's this whole story we haven't been told yet.
There's this whole community that hasn't really been touched just yet, and I find it kind of interesting.
So there are a lot of mysteries that are really interesting to think about, and it'll be interesting to see when they get explored and resolved. Though I'm sure a lot of these will be held off until the very end, very final stretches of the story.
What was he asking about besides mysteries again?
Oh, characters and stories as well. Characters that have mystery, have things about them that we haven't gotten fully explored. I guess in that respect, there's something about Crocodile and even Cobb's past that I kind of want to see what the deal was there.
Yeah, I really want to know more about that. I would also throw out, I kind of want to know more about Kuma.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm expecting Kuma to be Revolver Ocelot from Metal Gear. Just constantly somebody else's double agent.
That would be pretty good.
That'd be cool. All right, then EK's next question is, what is our favorite Straw Hat? For me, it's still Usopp. Again, I really love his character arc. He has some of my favorite moments in the entire series, during Alabasta when, he stands up for Luffy during the fight with Miss Merry Christmas and Mr. Four. Of course, Luffy versus Usopp. Usopp, encouraging Luffy to get up and fight during Enies lobby. There's just so many Usopp moments. I love Usopp. He's my favorite.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think Usopp is still my favorite. My pecking order after that, I feel has probably changed a bit since the last time I really thought about this, because I think Frankie used to be my favorite, my second favorite Straw Hat, but now I'm not sure if that's the case anymore, because I feel I don't know. Yeah, it's really tough. I know. In terms of my least favorite Straw Hats, my bottom three used to be Nami, Sanji, and Chopper. I feel Sanji with this current arc will, for me in particular, will probably. I feel I like his character so much more than I used to, and I feel we're if not now, I feel like we're on our way to getting back. The Sanji we all knew and loved. That we were introduced to back in Baratier, the cool, suave badass that we all came to know and love.
You don't like Nami?
That's not that I don't like actually, I used to not like Nami for a while. I don't know. For a while, she used to just get on my nerves, and I didn't really think she was funny. But the longer I've been a fan, she has great moments. I think actually one of my favorite Nami moments is actually from Skypiea when she kind of goes along with Eneru and just kind of plays along with him, so that she doesn't end up getting electrocuted like everyone else. And I love the moment where she turns down his offer to go with him to the moon. And, Eneru presents her with the idea of having, whatever she wants and all the money and treasure she wants. And, I felt like that was the moment that proved to me that, Nami isn't just all about money, that, she has humanity to her, and that she's not just, this one-note character. And I mean, I shouldn't say that, but because, I feel like you're supposed to kind of... Arlong Park was important, too, but I felt like... I think I didn't like Nami just because, I felt like after Arlong Park, she didn't have much of an opportunity to... she didn't have as many great moments afterwards, which is why I felt kind of... I either didn't like her, or I was just kind of, indifferent to her. And I think it wasn't until Skypiea Skypiea was a good reminder for me that Nami isn't just... she's a better character than I give her credit for, but... If I really had to be honest about my opinions with her during, this current place we are in the story, I like that she's been getting more time in Whole Cake Island to an extent. She's had some great moments, and she's had a lot of great, smug moments and whatnot, and especially with the latest chapter, and I love those parts about her so much. But I do hope we maybe get to a point just in general with One Piece where the women maybe have more of a chance to just do something.
Yeah, I think Robin has suffered more than Nami in this regard.
I totally agree. Though I will say that Robin's definitely up there for me in terms of favorite Straw Hat as well. She's definitely in my top 5 because I love her character so much.
What about you, Sam?
My favorite Straw Hat is Brook. His flashback is my favorite. His humor is my favorite. I think the fact that the Straw Hats have a skeleton on their crew is still just the most amazing thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
Funny enough, Brook is my least favorite just because he hasn't had a whole lot to do since Triller Bark. Because, immediately totally after fair. Triller Bark, it's the crew got separated, and then he really didn't have...
awesome in Whole Cake.
Yeah, in Whole Cake, I've really been liking him a lot. I've always liked Brook, but it's just... he's least favorite just by, circumstance, because he just hasn't been given as much as the other characters. But Whole Cake has done a lot for him, which I really appreciate. But, I think all the Straw Hats are great characters, just some have been given, more time to shine than others.
That's basically where I'm coming from with a lot of my Straw Hat ranking as well, is not that I necessarily hate any of the Straw Hats nowadays, it's just, some have just been given more time to shine than others.
Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, what is our favorite villain?
I have to say Crocodile.
Yeah, I said Crocodile in our villain rankings.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to go with good old Croco Boy, too. It's just, Crocodile, he was, the first really big, threatening villain. I mean, Arlong was, threatening, too, but Crocodile he seemed like he was on a whole nother level. He was the first warlord the Straw Hats were facing. He had this big organization under his belt. He seemed unbeatable. It took Luffy 3 times to finally put him down. He was the first really big threat, and he's so memorable because of that. But, before I wouldn't have said Crocodile, because for the longest time I really found Doflamingo interesting, But, I just, every moment we had gotten with him, like, just as little bits, he just seemed, like, so mysterious, and he seemed like he was, like, a real puppet master behind the world of One Piece. So that was, like, why I was so excited for Dressrosa, because they were finally going to tackle Doflamingo. But, as the more the arc went on, the more I just lost interest in Doflamingo as a villain. And, I do still like aspects of this Doflamingo, and I still think that he's very interesting, and I'm looking forward to whenever he returns again, because I'm sure, he's not going to be done. But, Crocodile just overall, in terms of how he's been in the story, how he was in Alabasta, and then what he did during his return in Impel Down and Marineford. Like, Crocodile,
and his potential for the rest of the story, too.
Yes. I think Crocodile is, remains, the best villain Oda has made.
And he continues to just get more interesting as the series goes on. He was a great villain in his own arc, and then he goes on to have his own character arc that's still unfolding throughout the big picture.
Yeah,
that's pretty great.
Man, I really want to see him show up again soon. I wonder when, but I really do.
To me, it really feels like how I interpret Crocodile is that he's somewhere along the way during Impel Down and Marineford, and even during the after effects of the war and whatnot, it really seems like his passion for, I guess for lack of a better word, piracy has really been ignited, and I feel like that's really interesting considering his whole thing with Luffy is that Crocodile constantly went on about how much more experienced he is than Luffy, and Crocodile constantly talking about how oh, you don't know what the world's like, kid, just whatever. And so I find that change, that's very subtle change in his character, very interesting.
Yeah.
And I also just want to bring up 2 points what you were talking about, Sid. I think the difference between I feel like the difference between Arlong and Crocodile is that Arlong was a threat, but compared to Crocodile, Arlong had the potential to become this really dictatorial ruler of the East Blue, and that threat was definitely a threat that loomed over him as a villain and over the arc as a whole. That's basically what would have happened if Luffy didn't stop him. But whereas with Crocodile, he already has his fingers into Alabasta. He's already kind of secretly controlling everything, and I feel that's, in my mind, that's what makes Crocodile more of a threat, is that he's already in control.
Mm-hmm. And he was presented people trusted Crocodile. To the people of Alabasta, he was a hero. So it was you couldn't directly confront him. You had to take him down behind the scenes. So there was more there was a grander sense of his untouchable status there.
And also just to touch on Doflamingo for a little bit, I feel like his build-up was a lot better than what we actually got. I mean, I still think he's a very interesting character, and I feel like there's probably more we could do with him. So, and I'm not sure if if the One Piece podcast guys have talked about this more. I feel like it's probably been brought up before, but I feel kind of betrayed when I think about the fact that I feel like Oda kind of missed the opportunity to really utilize Doflamingo's powers. I don't know. I feel like it would have been really cool if Doflamingo used his powers to have Luffy fight against his other friends. I kind of wish something like that kind of came out of it, but no, we just kind of got big waves and string tentacles and whatnot. I feel like
Doflamingo did that with Bellamy.
He did, but I feel like it would have been interesting to kind of utilize that during Dressrosa, and I feel like that was kind of a missed opportunity. Well, just in general, I feel like his powers weren't fully utilized, but that's just me. But he is still a great character, though.
Yeah.
And I've got a hunch that he might come back for Wano.
Maybe.
I can see that.
I mean, I don't think the ship that he was on though was sunken or anything.
No. He's still in the Marines' clutches, but I feel like there's all sorts of ways that I don't know, politics might get in the way, or maybe Kaido does something else,
or maybe Blackbeard breaks him out or something, and they team up. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I am definitely interested in seeing where Doflamingo what role he'll play in the rest of the story. But I suppose moving on to the next thing, what is our favorite fight in the series?
Oh man,
Oars.
Yeah, that's a good one. I remember really loving that fight as I was watching the anime, because it's like, I really felt like it was, as far as I can remember, really the first time the Straw Hats had to really team up with each other to fight one adversary. So I really like that aspect about the fight. So that's definitely up there for me. But oh man, there's so many good fights that, like, you know, it's so easy for me to just for a lot of these other questions to just say, like, you know, whatever comes to the top of my head, because I have easy answers for a lot of these questions, but this is actually kind of tough, because I want to say Luffy versus Usopp is probably my favorite fight.
That's definitely mine.
Not just because, like, you know, that fight just emotionally resonates with me, because it's like two characters I've come to know and love and get to know, where it's like, you know, it's like watching your two best friends fight.
Yeah.
Like, then there's nothing you could do about it. But it's also really neat because, like, it really shows just how intuitive and how inventive Usopp can be with his abilities when he's pushed to his limit, when he's backed into a corner. And the fact that he held his own against Luffy is kind of amazing.
Yeah, you know, that you basically just said, like, what I would say. Like, Luffy versus Usopp is my favorite fight, because as a huge Usopp fan, like, you know, that's, like, his most personal, like, emotional, like, thing. He's going up against Luffy, and we know going into it that there's no way Usopp can beat Luffy. But goddamn, if he doesn't give it his A game, he puts in so much effort and he tries so hard. And it's just so hard to watch too, when, like, Luffy just, you know, has enough of it and just beats him down. And it's just, it's really, really sad. So to me, like, emotionally, that is just, like, the most powerful fight in One Piece for me. Even though it's so one-sided.
My favorite fights are always the really big ones that have, like, lots of twists and turns and lots of false climaxes, and, like, you think you've beaten them, but oh no, he's getting up again. And yeah, so I like the Horse fight. I like the Eneru fight. I even like the Doflamingo fight in theory. I'll have to, you know, I'm still coming back around on Dressrosa in general, but that fight does in theory scratch a lot of itches for me.
And so, moving on to kind of our last set of questions here. What is our favorite story arc, and what is our least favorite story arc?
I guess I could just get this out of the way, because I mentioned it earlier, that Drum Island is pretty much my all-time favorite story arc in all of One Piece, no question. And I think that's mostly because I emotionally resonate with Chopper's backstory the most, because I think just, I don't know, I know a lot of people really like Robin's flashback and Brooks' flashback, which they're both very good. I don't want to devalue the merits, but just in terms of me personally, I really feel like I emotionally relate to a lot of Chopper's backstory, because, you know, I like stories where it's like, you know, it's about the outcast or whatnot, and, like, you get treated for, like, you know, being different or whatnot, because, you know, just to get kind of a little personal here, you know, like, when I was a kid, I was made fun of for my weight. I was a pretty fat kid. And so just that idea of being treated as something less than, like, a human being because something about you is different and you're kind of different from the rest of the crowd really just emotionally resonates with me, just as someone who was bullied in elementary school and whatnot. And even as far as, like, I just think Hero looks a great character, and I think his last line before he, like, his big speech before he dies, really, I think really, what makes One Piece, like, my all-time favorite manga is that, like, it's this moment in particular where Hero talks about, you know, how a man dies and whatnot. It's, you know, you don't die until you're forgotten. Like, that's really just, not only does it emotionally resonate with me, but it's really just kind of like, it's really shaped how my philosophy on life and just me as a person. And I can't really say that about too many other pieces of fiction that I have read. And really even just outside of Chopper's backstory, like, I really, he's not necessarily, like, the best villain, but I do have a soft spot for Wapol because he's just so cartoonishly evil, and he's so fun, but at the same time, he's so despicably evil, and I I love villains like that just, they're either the heroes of their own story or they have just so much fun being evil and they just don't think anything of it. Which is why I love villains like, say, Dio Brando in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Like, I love villains like that. And, you know, like, as the One Piece podcast guys have kind of been, you know, I really appreciate a lot of the out of context, like, Drum Island tweets, because, man, do those resonate with a lot of people right now in society. So, like, just in terms of all of that, I feel like this arc really holds up. It's a great standalone story, even though it's in the middle of, like, the Alabasta saga, if you will. Like, I watched the retelling of this movie with a friend of mine recently, and, you know, she wasn't, like, too super into it. She was tired that day, and she's not really, like, you know, I've tried showing her One Piece before, and, you know, she understands, you know, why people like it, but it's not really for her personally, and I understand that, but, you know, I watched movie 9 with her just recently, and, you know, from what she had seen, you know, she had at least seen most of Chopper's flashback, and I was like, hey, you know, like, did you at least like what you see? And she was like, I feel like that movie kind of showed her, like, okay, like, this series and franchise is capable of so much more than I thought at first. I really wish movie 9 was released, like, legally at some point, because I feel like that would actually be a great entry point for new fans.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Sam?
My favorite arc is Skypiea.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of gone into that earlier in this podcast already. It's like the perfect fantasy adventure for me. It's the arc that I was introduced to One Piece through. I love I love the world of Skypiea or the, you know, the islands and the clouds. I love the god theme stuff, even though I don't think it's, like, particularly deep about that stuff or anything, but I think it's a cool spin. It's a cool that we have a story that's you know, where the characters just punch a god. That's funny.
I'm definitely one of those people that wasn't, like, a big fan of Skypiea at the time. Like, I liked it, but I kind of dismissed it as, like, oh, it's a standalone thing. It has, like, nothing to do with the rest of the series. You could skip it, when nowadays, like, it's not really true. Like, it's not really a part of the story you can skip, especially since, like, it really, like, Skypiea as an arc actually, and it's like, and the lore behind just that arc in particular, like, has an effect on the lore of the rest of the series, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I always loved Skypiea. I just thought it was a really cool adventure story, and I really liked the, you know, conflict between the Shindorians and the Skypieans, and then the Cricket Kagura backstory. It was so good, and Enru was a lot of fun as a villain, especially in the dub with J. Michael Tatum. You know, great performance. Just, you know, it was just a really fun, cool, like, different kind of adventure story that was really cool to get back to, and it just felt different after, you know, Alabasta Baroque worked, which, you know, was that's kind of what I like about One Piece's arcs, is that, like, they all are, like, different feeling adventures in terms of, like, their scale, and, like, the locale of Skypiea, it was just such a cool place, especially, you know, the main island, the God's Island that they were on. So yeah, I really liked Skypiea, but you know, I really like Drum Island too. You know, it's hard for me to say, like, what my favorite arc in the series is these days, because, you know, it used to just be hands down Marineford, because, you know, having read that week to week, like, the scale of that was just mind-blowing, and at the time, like, that was, like, the most exciting thing going on in manga, like, for me, and that was during the time when I was, like, most engrossed in One Piece, and, like, the most enthusiastic about it, you know, especially compared to, like, where Naruto and Bleach were at the time, where Bleach was, like, you know, they were still fighting Aizen, and during Deicide, which was a thing, and Naruto, you know, was the Five Kage Summit, and you know, that's where things were getting off the rails for me. But so Marineford, you know, for me, like, that felt like a big deal. That was like a real, like, war arc, you know, when you compared it to, like, what Bleach and Naruto's war arcs were, because, like, you had multiple factions. It was crazy, it was chaotic, there were these insane two-page spreads. It was just insane page turner week after week that I would, like, you know, whenever I saw the new chapter come out, I would, like, quickly consume and, like, be like, oh man, holy crap, because it was just like every week there was just something amazing and like astonishing happening. But I don't know if I would say Marineford is still my favorite arc, because, you know, when I go back and think about like the parts of the series that have stuck with me the strongest, you know, those parts, you know, I think it has to be like either Arlong Park or Alabasta, because those, I think about to the moments back in those arcs, and I think about like how the impact they left on me. And, you know, when I think about like prime One Piece and like what I think about One Piece, you know, I do think about those earlier adventures from the East Blues to Alabasta, and like I think about like the high moments in those arcs, like how I mentioned earlier, those moments in Arlong Park, like, you know, Nami's backstory, like, you know, Nami like stabbing her tattoo and then Luffy stopping her, and then the march on Arlong Park, and then in Alabasta the moment where Luffy finally defeats Crocodile, like the effort everyone goes through to get on top of like that clock tower to defuse the bomb, and then like Vivi's like in despair because like there's no way to defuse it, and then Pell takes it and he like flies up making what's at the time looks like this big heroic sacrifice, and he turns out that he's alive later. But that's okay. The moment is still amazing, and it's just there's just
man.
there's so many great moments in those like early adventures, and in those two arcs in particular that have all stuck with me, you know, the most over the years, and that what I always think back to first when I think about One Piece. So yeah, it's either one of those two, and I might just say Arlong Park for now, just because I reread it for this podcast. I reread the volumes I had, and it's like, oh god, it's so good. I love these earlier adventures.
Yeah, I think the entirety of the Alabasta saga I think is probably my favorite portion of One Piece.
Yeah, but you know, the fact that we all have kind of different different portions of One Piece that we like really love kind of shows like, you know, how the appeal of like One Piece is like every like story arc does have its own thing going on that's just, you know, so unique and fun. So everyone can have their own different arc, but they're all great, you know, and so that's really great about One Piece. Oh, and I guess like we also have to answer the second half of the question, which was like, what is our least favorite story arcs, I guess.
I feel like it has to be, I don't know, because I feel like if you asked me this years ago, I probably would have said Fishman Island, but now I'm actually trying to choose in my head between Fishman Island and Dressrosa. I actually don't know. I'm basically trying to decide which one I like more than the other, and I actually can't decide.
What about you, Sam?
I don't know if I necessarily have one. Like the ones my go-tos are usually like Impel Down and Little Garden, but like I don't dislike them. Like
yeah,
there's the ones I like. I have the least liking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. I don't think there's any arc in One Piece that I think is bad or I completely dislike them. I guess earlier I said that Fishman Island, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of it. Like, even though I don't think it's bad, and then the Dressrosa did try my patience, but you know, when I go back and look at them, I still think there were some great moments in those arcs. I would put those two towards the bottom, I suppose, just to have an answer. But like, a part of me also thinks that, you know, I could just say I like the Davy back fight, but I guess in terms of like what it adds to the story, like Fishman and Island and Dressrosa add so much more. And Davy back fight is a lot of fun and I really enjoy it. But I guess, you know, if I had to just choose, then maybe I'd just choose that just because it adds the least to the story. But, you know, I don't know. Again, it's not a bad arc, and I don't think there are any bad arcs in One Piece.
I guess I'm going to go with Dressrosa on the notion that at least Fishman Island wasn't as long.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it lasted a year in the story in terms of serialization, but again, I would prefer year-long arcs than 2-year-long arcs, honestly, I guess in theory, but yeah. That's really my biggest problem with Dressrosa is I think it just, and I know most people probably said this already, but like, you know, I just personally feel like Oda might have bit off a bit more than he could chew with that arc, and I just feel like that arc might have gone too long in general, and at some point like most people, I got kind of arc fatigue. There was just a point where I'm like, okay, I just want this to be over. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that does it for our questions. Thank you, Dr. Ansatsu Ken, for sending those in to us. And for in the future, guys, remember to send in your questions to us just on anywhere you can reach us, on Twitter or Animation Revelation forums, or send us to our email at mangamavericks@gmail.com. We love reading your questions and answering them on the show.
But yeah, I think we're finally done.
Yeah. As we predicted, we went on for almost about 3 hours here.
Yep, I can't wait to edit this.
Yeah, but at least we stayed focused on the topic, unlike yesterday when I was recording the Spider-Man Homecoming episode of Manga Mavericks at Movies, where me and Jonathan went on insane rants and off-tangent rants about Sonic comics and Archie comics. And oh man, that was a weird podcast. Yeah, I guess, Sam, thank you so much for coming on and talking One Piece with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I guess, where can the good people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Lucky Chainsaw. They can find me on AnimeNewsNetwork.com doing the daily streaming reviews for One Piece, Dragon Ball Super, and My Hero Academia. And they can find me doing the anime recaps every week on the One Piece podcast.
Yeah, if you don't already listen to the One Piece podcast, I would definitely recommend giving it a listen. I've pretty much been listening ever since, probably right after they first started back. I've been listening since 2009, around when Strong World was relevant at the time. So I've been listening since almost the beginning. And again, like I said, first podcast I ever listened to, and really the podcast that got me into wanting to listen to more podcasts and creating my own podcast. So the One Piece podcast is a very special place in my heart in terms of that. So definitely go listen to them if you don't already. I mean, if you're a fan of One Piece and you're not listening, you're really missing out.
Definitely. I'm a much more recent fan of the One Piece podcast. I started listening to you guys back when you started doing the One Piece Reads Through series. But yeah, the One Piece podcast is one of my favorite podcasts. And if you're a fan of One Piece, there is no better place to get passionate One Piece discussion and awesome character voices like Casey's Caesar impression, which is the best. And Funimation should cast him as Caesar in the actual dub.
Yeah, Casey's amazing, and we love him, so shout out to Casey.
Yes. And I always enjoy reading Sam's reviews of One Piece, Dragon Ball Super, and MHA, and I definitely recommend you check those out as well, because they're great reviews.
But I guess, Sid, where can the people find you?
You can find me as @LumRamayasha on Twitter, and LumRamayasha just anywhere I am, like Animation Revelation, and my anime list, and basically just anywhere, just search for LumRamayasha, and if I'm there, I'm there. And then I also do reviews for allcomic.com, so you can keep an eye out for those as well. And yeah, that's basically where you can find me.
All right. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at SniperKing323. That's SNIPERKING323. And I guess as for other podcasts I'm a part of, I mentioned Life Lessons, the Gintama Manga Cast earlier. I'm, not just One Piece, but I'm an even bigger fan of Gintama. So if you're a fan of Gintama and you want a more retrospective look on the series from the very beginning through the now discontinued Viz Media release, you can follow that. That's at gintalifelessons.wordpress.com. Again, that's Life Lessons, the Gintama Manga Cast. Or if you're a fan of Detective Conan or Case Closed, whatever you want to call it, Viz is still releasing that, thankfully. And you can find me and my friend Doctor from the Ass Backwards Anime Podcast talking about Detective Conan from the very beginning over at One Podcast Prevails. That's onepodcastprevails.wordpress.com. But as for Manga Mavericks, you can find every episode of Manga Mavericks over at all-comic.com. That's obviously where we put every episode first. You can also follow us on facebook.com/all.comic or on twitter.com/allcomic_. Or if you just want to follow Manga Mavericks specifically, you can follow us, like Sid said, over at Twitter at manga_Mavericks. Or you can email us anything. What do you think about One Piece? What other manga are you reading in general? Just anything manga related, podcast related, and we'll answer it on the show at mangamavericks@gmail.com. And Sid, why don't you talk about the YouTube page for a second?
Yes, also subscribe to our YouTube page. You can just search for it as Manga Mavericks. That's the channel name. We remember, guys, we need those 100 subscribers to get that custom URL. Let's get to that. We're almost there, and YouTube has been growing a lot lately. We just got our first video that got over 1,000 views, which is a really cool thing for us, considering we're such a small channel right now. So cool. I'm really excited for the YouTube because I also have other projects specifically for the YouTube in the works. So definitely check out our channel, and I keep posted on the stuff that's going to be coming out there pretty soon.
Follow us on YouTube. I don't believe we have 100 subscribers just yet.
No, but we're getting there. We're close.
Yeah, so the more people that subscribe to us, the faster we can get a custom URL. So for now, you can just search Manga Mavericks on YouTube, and you'll find a couple of our videos. But the most important thing, guys, is that you subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever we call it. The Apple Podcasts, the artist formerly known as iTunes. Subscribe, rate, and review us. Really helps our podcast visibility on there. So, if you have a little time and you feel the need to do so, please do. We'd really appreciate it. That's going to be about it for this episode of Manga Mavericks. We will see you guys next time for episode 37. Bye, guys.
Sayonara.